Okay. I call this meeting to order at 10:02 a.m. I will start by asking for a roll call. So I'll start on my right.
Dr. Carrie Williams, industry member.
Jackie Crabtree, industry member.
Steve Weeks, public member.
Andrew Drabkin, public member.
Lisa Tong, public member. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I'll start with some opening remarks. I know that in the past I haven't had too much to say, but I do have a few thoughts to share with everyone this morning before we get started. So just bear with me. First, just a reminder that the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology is, above all, a consumer protection board. We look at all items of discussion through the lens of health and safety to California consumers by promoting ethical standards and by enforcing the laws of the barbering and beauty industry. We have, in many various instances, looked at our licensees with this same lens. At the end of the day, our licensees are also consumers, and their health and safety should also be a priority. And I'm saying this because I am asking everyone today to consider what I'm about to share, as well as the board members. I've given this quite a bit of thought in the past few weeks. I've asked myself if our own licensees can afford to be consumers themselves and what their economic outlook actually looks like. So I actually looked up some numbers on the Bureau of Labor Statistics site for California. And I found that the annual mean wage for a barber is $35,850. For hairdressers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists, $31,400. Manicurists and pedicurists, $26,260. For some reason, there's a shampooer category, and they are at $25,510. Skincare specialists, $34,780. So obviously, there's a lot of questions about these numbers. I also looked at the number of individuals who are reporting under these categories, and this is with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 65,000 licensees, which is a drastic difference between the number of licensees we have. So clearly there is a huge discrepancy, and underreporting is a huge concern. And I don't mean that I'm concerned by whether or not people are paying their taxes. What I'm concerned with is that the people who are not reporting, fast forward into the future when they are 65 or 70, not able to work, we will have hundreds of thousands of people who did not put anything away into an IRA, never paid into Social Security, didn't make enough to put anything into savings, and may not have economic security or a social safety net. I don't think it's an accident that we are seeing a rise in homelessness as we see a rise in the gig economy. I have a lot of concerns about the direction this industry is headed in. I ask that everyone consider this as we go through our agenda for today. And I ask that we look at our regulations and policy, the decisions and the work of this board, not just through the lens of what is happening in this industry, but also at the broader impact of where we are at as a state economically. And it's not enough for us to be looking at our decisions and the immediacy of what the industry looks like right now. I think we need to be talking about what a thriving, economically sound, sustainable, and well-regulated beauty industry in California should look like and how we can get there. So that's something that I will charge myself with as we move forward, and I just ask that everybody consider to do the same. Thank you for bearing with me. I'd like to open it up right now to board member remarks.
What you just stated was completely my thoughts, and I thank you for taking the time to research that, Lisa, and give those statistics, especially which I've known, being in the industry 30 years, the 65,000 licensees that are reporting their income, and that's huge because, of course, we're trying to regulate health and safety as well as have a thriving industry. So I really thank you for taking the time to share those numbers, because that has been my biggest concern in this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. I wanted to thank you, Lisa, because as an industry member, I too am passionate about the economic stability of our licensees, and being a business owner in the industry has always been my passion to educate as many individuals as I can about the importance of saving and planning for the future. And so I appreciate you sharing those numbers and getting it recorded in our minutes. And I too will charge myself moving forward to make sure that I continue to keep that at the forefront as we develop or have conversation around regulations for our industry.
Any other board member remarks? All right, thank you. I will move on to public comment on items not on the agenda.
Hi, Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. I have a tear in my eye right now because I feel that the board has been listening to what I've been bringing you as far as labor violations. I manage a group of about 5,000 licensees, and they're mostly estheticians. And I am so concerned for their futures, every single one of them. The labor violations that are happening in our industry that are going without any sort of enforcement is really, really shocking to me because I came from outside of the industry, from a place where there's an HR department, and there's taxes being taken out and all those other things. And for the board to acknowledge today that this is a really huge and massive problem within our industry, I'm so incredibly thankful for. So thank you.
Good morning, Caroline Barboza, Barboza Barber Academy. And I was just, I like what you had to say. And I try to spread the word about Cal Savers. It's a new program, I'm sure are you aware? Yeah, so I try to spread the word within the barbering community. So, we can all get some retirement in there. We really need it. Thank you for addressing that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Trang. I'm an attorney with Asian Americans Advancing Justice Los Angeles. Advancing Justice is the country's largest civil rights and legal service agency in the country, promoting the interests of the API community. We have a satellite office in Orange County. We have a legislative office in Sacramento. We also work closely with our affiliate, Asian Law Caucus in the Bay Area. Our organization has long been invested in these industries, nail salon and related industries, in part because of the demographic makeup of the workforce. As an organization, we believe that workers should be treated with dignity and respect and afforded all the rights under the law. We also support businesses that comply with the law and believe that unscrupulous employers that exploit workers and engage in ways that give them an unfair advantage over law-abiding businesses should be held to account. And to that end, our organization over many years has conducted Know Your Rights presentations, both in Vietnamese and in English, to both employers and workers regarding employment law, the employment law in California. We have been both a lead sponsor in a number of legislation, as well as kind of sponsoring and supportive of a number of other bills. We also file lawsuits against unscrupulous businesses that engage in severe labor law violations. And most recently, we brought a lawsuit against a luxury nail salon business in Orange County and settled for over $550,000. Our organization has had decades of employment law expertise and has given legal advice and represented scores of nail salon workers with employment law issues. The overwhelming number of the workers that come to our offices have suffered workplace violations directly related to misclassification. I know that we're going to be talking a bit about AB 5 later today, and that's part of why I'm here. And so I will explain further once the agenda item is raised about why my organization is taking the position against any sort of exemption for the BBC licensees. And I'm happy to also stick around to answer any specific questions for the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Christy. Some of you aren't familiar with me. Christy is. I've sat where you've sat. I'm a former board member, 4 years, former DRC member. So you've got a big job, big work. Huh?
You haven't said your name yet.
My name is Ken Williams. I'm now the president of Universal College of Beauty, a family-owned and operated school with 90 years of history. Very proud to be here. Very much an understanding of what your job involves, and your opening words were right on point. I'm going to try not to get long-winded and emotional because this is an emotional thing for me. I have students in the background and teacher trainees in the background. I opened up a brand new school in January, one of a very few. The insight and the feelings I have about this industry, I could not state today. But there are some inequities. There's some things that this board can do to change the landscape. I'm here 100% to help because the industry and you as board members have to work as a team. There's a lot of things that I don't like. I don't want to go through the laundry list of things that I don't think are fair. But I think with a lot of time and insight, more meetings, more understandings, I'm going to make myself available for communication. I was a part of a board that had 9 members. I don't see 9 members here. Okay, I don't know if the board is shrinking or growing. I know that in the state of California, we have 2 oversights. We have oversights with BPPE and the board. I don't think it's right. Never did. I think our board should be the sole authority over schools and licensing and everything else, cosmetology. I don't know if BPP has that expertise. I don't know if anything will change. But I know you mentioned shampooing as a occupation. It's unfortunately unlicensed in the state of California. When I was a board member, I tried to fight for that so that there could be a license for a shampoo or someone that had completed some hours. I think there's a big inequity with braiders. Braiders don't have to have a license. Why is that? Braiding is an art and it's a science and it involves health and safety. And yet there's no requirements for braiders. Christy knows exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is when I was a board member, I looked at the 500,000 licensees. Now it's in the 600,000s. There are more people that owe their livelihoods to this field, and some are not being treated fairly. And it just exists. And I tried to do everything I could in 4 years to help change it, and nothing moved. The needle didn't really move. I don't know what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot more communication, a lot more understanding, a lot more of a lot, because this field is a great, great field. And then some of our licensees, even some of my students, they get disenchanted in school. They hear about state board enforcement going into salons and enforcing the rules that we oversee, and sometimes there are issues that come up. When I was a DRC member, I made it a point to go on ride-alongs with the inspectors. I wanted to see exactly what they did. I wanted to say I visited many nail salons. Many beauty shops, because in order for me to evaluate DRC, I wanted to know what the inspector saw. And so it helped me to make decisions. So I understand exactly what your jobs are, your charges are. You have big jobs. I don't know if I'd want to be a board member again. But the fact that I don't see a school owner on the board anymore. I don't know if there are movement. I think there should be. And I want this to be a strong board. I want it to be an effective board. And the schools should be supportive of this board. We should figure out how to streamline and make it easier for students to get licensed. When we had a school, I used to have a school in Charlotte, North Carolina. When our students went to the board and they scored between 70 but not 75, but up to 74, they were given a provisional license. They could work until their next test date. Now, every day, people come away from the state board with maybe a 74 score, 73 didn't pass, have to go back. But they have children to feed, and they can't work, and they get caught in the middle because they can't work legally. And so what do? Some of them never go back to the board. Some of them continue to work unlicensed for many, many years because of the fear factor. There's a lot we could do. I suggested that maybe the written could be given at 1,200 hours. And a student, even if they failed, by the time they got 1,600, they could go back and pass.
We will be discussing the licensing exams later today.
Thank you so much. I hope I said something that was meaningful to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Yvette Becerra. I represent Electrologists Association of California. Ms. Thong, the numbers that you gave, you didn't include the electrologists?
Sorry. I didn't see that when I looked up the numbers.
I know we're little in the profession, in the Board of Barbering, but I would be curious to know that as well. Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Fu. I'm the Executive Director of the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative. We are a statewide organization with offices in Southern California and in San Francisco Bay Area. We were founded in 2015, and our mission is to support the health, safety, and rights of the nail and beauty care workforce to achieve a healthier, more sustainable, and just industry. We do outreach and leadership development, research, policy advocacy. We have engaged our members in grassroots policy advocacy work and have had several recent victories, including the passage of AB 2775 in 2018 that requires manufacturers to disclose ingredients on the labels of professional cosmetic products. In 2016, we also helped to pass AB 2025, calling for increased workers' rights education, including in-language materials among BBC licensed businesses. And we also sponsored AB 2125, requiring Department of Toxins and Substance Control to educate and support counties to establish local healthy nail salon recognition programs. Since 2014, we've conducted trainings and outreach to thousands of nail salon workers in California on issues of health, safety, and workers' rights. With our Vietnamese staff, we have conducted our outreach and trainings in Vietnamese and really to accommodate the language and cultural needs of the predominantly Vietnamese workforce, especially in the manicurist industry. And over the years, we have seen that our members and the people that we have trained and outreach to are not just manicurists, but they are mothers, they are providers for their families, they are immigrants and refugees, and we have seen the challenges that they face, not just as a manicurist, but also as a result of being misclassified. And so I'll be talking later on today, later on in the agenda, about why we support the passage of AB 5 without an exception for manicurists.
Thank you. Additional public comments? Thank you, everyone, for your remarks. It's great to see a very full room of people who want to be engaged. Next agenda item is actually Executive Officer's Report, so I'm going to turn this over to Christine.
Thank you. So I have a couple updates other than the statistics that are in the agenda packet. We just recently conducted an examination in a state correctional facility. It was a small one. We only had 2 candidates that were ready, and one of those did pass because he was actually taking a practical only, so we were able to tell right away. And then the other individual we send those tests to our vendor to be scored, so we're waiting for those results. And I also wanted to let you know that I'll be attending the National Interstate Council for Cosmetologists annual conference that will be held early September in Milwaukee. So we'll have 2 days to start that with, where all the executive directors that attend from the state boards meet for 2 days, and then they have a general session for the entire committee contingents. So I will have a report for you at our next meeting on how that goes. And then we have our statistics, pretty standard information. We have added a little bit to our enforcement statistics. On page 9, we added our top 10 consumer harm cases because we wanted to be able to kind of see how the harm that's reported has been, if it's gotten better, if it's gotten worse. Again, these are cases that are reported to us. We do show that we have a decrease in pedicure infections, and we thought we would see that as well. And in 2014 is when we changed some of our reporting mechanisms with the BREEZE system. So prior to 2014, the data was calculated in a different manner, so we couldn't kind of go back further. However, we did look at older statistics, and the pedicure infection rate was much higher than even 83 in 2015, prior to some of the work that has been done on the regulations for cleaning the foot spas, as well as the immediate suspension process. So while we do see pedicures looking a little better, we do still have some other areas that are climbing in a sense. So definitely skincare is one of our biggest concerns right now because of the enormous amount of new products that are coming out, or machines that are being used that probably shouldn't be used. So we're getting that information out slowly, but hopefully, we're going to be addressing it more and more on our social media. For those of you that don't follow it, please do. You can see that whenever we post information about any skincare service, it gets definitely the most attention. Thank you, Wendy. But it's our social media has been amped up quite a bit, and ever since we've went live with Instagram, it's been a huge difference, actually. I didn't believe it before it happened, but it's been pretty successful. And then we did do some outreach. We recently attended a rally at the state capitol that was for senior citizens, and our booth is always very popular for that. So we were able to talk to a lot of consumers that were at that event. We also did an event with Assemblymember Chris Holden. He had a community fair in his district, so we were able to attend that as well and had a lot of contact with some consumers as well. And then we are doing face and body, and as well as Nail Pro in Sacramento, but we're looking right now to really increase our attendance at the consumer events as opposed to the industry events. So I think with the next board meeting, you'll see some more consumer awareness events that we're able to attend. Okay, and I'll answer any questions on any of the statistics.
Just a quick question. The consumer harm cases, seems like it did increase. Do you think that's due to just more reporting, or is it something actually happening out there that is causing more consumer harm? Because especially I'm thinking of the jump between 17 and 18 isn't that when we switched the signage to say, like, if you have a problem, contact us, and then maybe is that making it more visible for people to contact us? Or
it could be. I hope so. I hope that sign is, since it's more simplified, will get more people to come forward. But it's hard to say for sure.
I have a question for us, Christy.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty easy to get statistics on applications and exams and re-exam. Is it possible to develop a statistic that shows us the time it takes an average student to pass the exam? I mean, is it 1.2, 1.5, whatever number of tests it may take?
Yes, we can get that. At least I'm pretty sure we can get that. I could have people back in Sacramento right now having a heart attack, but I'm pretty sure we can get that data. Any other questions?
It's interesting, the number of where you're broke it down into the categories. You know, again, going back to hoping that the legislator is looking at this to understand the importance of not deregulating our industry, as well as Lisa Tong's remark about people not reporting their income, coming together really to understand, to help create the information that they need to know to understand our industry. So thank you for breaking that down. It's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. If nothing else on the executive officer's report, I'll move on. I believe we had public comment on this.
Hi, Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. App investigation, can you define that, please?
I'm sorry?
App investigation.
It's when an individual and an applicant marks that they've had a conviction in the past.
Okay, so this isn't mobile apps that you are
No,
investigating. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, approval of the April 29th board meeting minutes.
I move that we approve.
Second.
Everyone seconds, do you still have to do a vote?
All right. Public comment on the minutes? No public comment, so I will go to a vote, starting on my right. I can start with myself.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Andrew Drafkin, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Can I make one statement, though? Is that our board minutes, I think, I've served on a lot of boards, and they're really well done. It's very complete, and they always do a really good job, so whoever is doing that deserves congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Is that Marcine?
You actually contracted out.
Oh, okay. Well, staff's doing great. So.
We checked it.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 6, update and possible action regarding Health and Safety Advisory Committee. Christy, did you want to introduce this?
So our Health and Safety Advisory Committee met on July 29th. We had an in-depth discussion about AB 5, and I'll just continue. And we also talked about updating our health and safety regulations. We did decide staff is going to be working with some industry experts to put together kind of a mock-up of what we'd like to see the health and safety regulations look like. And that'll be going back to the Health and Safety Advisory Committee, as well as coming to the full board when we get that in through that process. It's going to be a big project, but I think one that's very overdue to try to bring our health and safety regulations current, as well as make sense and make sure we have regulations that we can enforce and not regulations that we're citing people for items that we can't really enforce. So it's actually very exciting, and so I think this is going to be a real good process to get these regulations updated. And then we also talked about AB 5. The committee did make some recommendations to the board that the board can discuss today. I do want to make sure that we first and foremost appoint a alternate member to the committee. so that we failed to do that at our last board meeting. So we want to make sure we just have 3 board members designated that could attend that meeting. We could actually handle that first and then go into the next one. So if we have a volunteer for that alternate position.
I would volunteer for that.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Carey, you can be
Okay.
second alternate.
I mean, I won't fight for it.
Oh, no.
I think you should. I think we should have a vote for it right now.
So we would do the motion.
Okay, so
Steve as an alternate.
okay, so motion. I'll move to approve Steve as an alternate to the health and safety.
I'll second it.
I guess we will. Oh, we do need public comment. Any public comment on appointing the alternate? No public comment, so I will move to a vote. I'll start with myself. Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Draffin, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carey Williams, yes.
Great, thank you.
And so the next motion that the committee voted on and approved at the committee level was regarding AB5, and AB5 is also on our agenda in a couple items, but I think this discussion might take place better here. The committee did recommend that we approach policymakers for a booth rental permit. You may remember that was in AB5. It is no longer in AB5. They also recommended that we engage the author to appropriately refer to board licensees as opposed to workers. The language right now says workers, and that's not a term we normally use in our laws and regulations. Add verbiage regarding their professional license in Section E of the bill, and then request all occupational licenses be included in the exemption in AB5. So that's what the committee is putting forward to the board. And so now it's the board's opportunity to discuss that and decide which direction they would like to go.
So I'll add to that since I was the only board member present at the committee meeting. I actually abstained from voting on this motion. I will explain why. I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues on the board who are owners, because I would really like to hear your perspective on AB5 and what you think about this language. For myself, I abstained from the vote because I think this is a very complex issue. Booth renter permits, whether or not our licensees should be exempt from the AB5 language, which actually codifies the Dynamex decision. And for me, the Dynamex decision simplifies categorization of workers versus independent contractors. I know that our industry is primarily booth rental. I don't know that that's actually the best thing for the industry. So I've spent the past 2 weeks obviously thinking about this a lot. And I've definitely heard from a number of the folks in the audience. I think this is a very difficult issue, and I don't know that we've had enough time as a board or even as an industry in terms of having conversations about what actually needs to take place regarding categorization. So I actually have changed my mind significantly from when we met as a committee at that time. Even though I abstained from the vote, I thought that since the language was actually already in AB5 as an exemption, that the only thing we needed to consider was whether or not we should be changing the language to licensees and adding manicurists. But I've actually come to the conclusion that I don't think that we as a board should support having exemptions in AB5 for any of our license categories. I know that we abstained from taking a position on AB5 earlier, mainly because it's never really been in the purview of the board to make decisions on labor law. That's not our purview. It's not our expertise. But in consideration of, this is actually why I looked up the numbers for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I wanted to know how much our industry was earning. I don't think that encouraging our industry to increase the number of independent contractors, to go down this road of booth rentals is going to help the earning side of our licensees. So I'm going to have my board members weigh in on what your thoughts are on all of this.
I would love to. As I know you know. You know, I've been in the industry 30 years, which you all know. I own 4 salons. All my salons are employee-based. I know what goes on in our industry. I know how many people don't report their income, and they do it because they can get away with it because it's so easy. I mean, we don't have enough people out there to regulate it in the labor laws and in the tax evasion and all the things that go on. This has been going on forever. And we have a huge amount of licensees in California that are not paying their taxes. And it's not fair for the honest people. And so, we have all of that going on. I think AB5 is giving the whole carte blanche to keep continuing to do that. I'm not saying that booth rental is a horrible idea. Of course, there's people out there who are responsible and are going to abide by it. But, I mean, I feel like we're setting the students not up for success by them knowing they can get out and do these things. And I think that we're not protecting our industry by continuing to open it up. Plus all the violations that happen in the nail industry and the people getting taken advantage of, as well as the people who don't understand that they're not paying taxes. I think us supporting it is horrible. I mean, I want to protect our industry and protect the individuals coming into our industry, as well as the consumers. So I think that, that's what Dynamex was for, was to help kind of put, a line in the sand. I mean, do hospitals have independent contractors, and they're not regulated and they can do whatever they want? I mean, it's just my feeling on it. So I am just, my hat's off to you for looking at those numbers, because I never even realized you could find that information, which I do fill those out to send in, thinking, why. But yeah, I know that $35,000 a year for a hairstylist is such a lie. I mean, I know people make 6 figures easy enough in our industry doing our services. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Being in the industry and working, what I do know is that a lot of individuals come into the barbering cosmetology industry to work for themselves and to be able to generate an income for themselves. And I know that, and I'm really trying to process it, because I've been a salon owner where I've had booth renters, and then I've also been a salon owner where I've had employees. And so I've experienced both sides. And I know that predominantly our industry has ran with individuals who are able to come in and rent a booth. The discussion around having a booth rental permit, I think, if that is attached to a licensee being able to have a booth rental permit, then it really sets them up to function within a salon space and have more accountability. And I know that there are a lot of students who, when coming into this industry, struggle, and if they aren't under the right mentorship and leadership, are set up to fail. I'm going to take some more time to kind of process my thoughts, because like you said, it's so layered. And as a board, knowing that we focus on consumer protection, but then being in the industry and understanding the other side of it, I'm going to take some more time. I'm going to comment some more, but I just want to take some more time to process. Now that I've received, I'm hearing, what your thoughts are. I definitely understand where Jackie's coming from, so more time to process.
It's pretty complicated. Yeah.
Can I suggest that maybe I'm a little uncomfortable with a decision on this now. I would like to hear more discussion and maybe some public input. Can we link this to our discussion on AB5 later? Can we push this down the agenda?
Well, they have to decide. They cannot take action on the committee's motion.
Well, the recommendation from the committee comes to the board as a motion and a second. So logistically, how it would work is after your discussion and your public comment, then you would vote on those provisions. They can hold it off after the AB5 discussion and then take this recommendation.
Can we table this
Right.
until post the AB5 discussion? Though, can I ask one quick question before on the subject before we table it? Do we know why the booth rental permit was struck from AB5? And what was the rationale for doing that? If we're going to ask them to put it back in, it's kind of a good idea to know why they're taking it out in the first place.
I don't.
You
So
don't?
you possibly might be able to gain that in public comment.
Public comment when we get to AB5 later on the agenda. Sounds good. I move that we table this discussion for a period of time.
So I'm just trying to understand. So this is already a motion and a second. So
From the committee.
from the committee. So we as a board are discussing. That means that we next, if board is done discussing, would have to open for public comment. Is that correct? Or do we?
Right. You can open it. You'll have to open it for public comment, but you don't have to do it now. You can wait till the board has discussed the AB5 implications mentioned in the recommendation from the committee.
Okay. Okay. So we're just gonna go ahead and move this discussion to the agenda item under legislative updates, and we will combine our conversation with our decision on AB5. Okay. All right. So then, in that case, I will be moving on to agenda item number 7. Update and discussion regarding Spanish language examination pass rates.
I do have several items to update you on in this area. We recently went live with our computer-based testing vendor to where now everyone who takes the examination in one of our other languages sees that question, and if it's Spanish, it'll be in Spanish and English on the screen. And that's actually for all languages that it's been done. So that just went into effect recently, so we haven't seen any increases yet. Hopefully we will. But they are seeing that on the computer screen now, both in English and in the other requested language. We did, we did meet with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards on discussion with our extremely low apprentice pass rates. They were concerned, but we didn't get really any action out of that. We'll continue to meet with them, but what I am recommending, I do believe we have some good authority that we could develop some regulations on the apprentice program that will hopefully strengthen that area. For the most basic example is apprentices are not required to have textbooks. We think a lot do have them, but there's no requirement like we have for a school that you have to provide the textbooks, you have to provide the health and safety course. That isn't in regulations for apprentices. So that's something that we believe we could come back in October at our next board meeting with a recommendation or at least a start of where we can go with strengthening under our current authority for that program to try to get some of these individuals the information that they need that they're not getting to see if they can do better on the exam. The apprentice program is predominantly Spanish-speaking individuals, as we've discussed in the past. So we definitely have to take some steps to try to strengthen the education that they're receiving while in that program, or it's never going to work.
I'm sorry, Christy, the apprentice is under D.
So the apprentice sponsor, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, which
has
is
their own thing.
Right.
Okay,
They're a division under the Department of Industrial Relations.
Okay, DRR. Okay.
Yeah. And then we are still in discussions about a potential combined score to have the practical. I don't like to use the words weighted because then it becomes into a testing world. But as we've discussed in the past, we are still in discussions and working with DCA on trying to get an idea of what we could do to have a combined score. It's going to be talked about as well at our NIC conference, so it'll be interesting if I can find out if any other states are doing a scoring method like that as well. So hopefully in October we'll have some more information on that aspect. And that's all I have.
Christy, when you say, when you talked about the apprenticeship, that they're concerned, are you just being polite?
Yes.
And so we were being blown off to a certain extent. Is there anything besides regulations which are more, I hate to say it, more long-term, medium-term solution? Is there anything, do we have anything we can do in the short term that we can push back on them? And so
no, I mean, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards has, they look at they regulate the sponsors, and I do think they were genuinely concerned with these low passage rates. The apprentice program for this board is very different than apprentice programs for other industries. They have to have a license from our board. Most other industries don't require a license as an apprentice. So we've taken this license and we've made it, that's why it's 3,200 hours. It has to be 3,200 hours to make it an apprenticeship program for any apprentice. So we've taken our cosmetology, for example, or barbering, and made it 3,200 hours, which is a 2-year license. So we fit these two industries in a sense together that never may have really been intended to be fit together. This apprenticeship programs is actually a topic on the agenda for the national conference, because I found that every state, there's quite a few states that have an apprenticeship program that do it not as much as the same as we do, and they're having the exact same issues. So there's going to be a full discussion to the entire council that comes to the meeting in Milwaukee on apprenticeships. So that'll be interesting as well. But the Division of Apprenticeship Standards doesn't look at pass rates.
that's why.
They look at completion.
If I'm a student, or I'm going to be a student, I can look up schools and find out the pass-fail rate of those schools, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If I wanted to be an apprentice, can I look up the
Yes.
pass-fail rate of that instructor?
It's by program sponsor. So it's by their business name in a sense. But yes, we report their pass rates the same as we do schools. And so one of the interesting, and
Can
at
we
Division of
publicize that
Apprenticeship,
more? It's like that way we're holding them more accountable? Or I'm just thinking of like a short-term solution until we get, well, it might even work long-term too,
Right.
but till we can get regulations passed, it would be more of a, use our social media. Thinking about being an apprentice, take a look at your at
We could do
your
that, for
pass-fail
sure.
rates or something like that. Kind of, I don't know whether it will actually have an effect on an actual individual,
Right.
unfortunately, but it might
Right.
get past this concerned part of like, hey, they're kicking up
Right.
dust here. We better look into this.
Yes.
Kind of a thing.
We have also put together an apprentice sponsor handbook, and there are some good apprenticeship programs out there. We've had them come into our office and kind of work through it with us to see if it's something that we're on the right track, because a lot of apprentice programs aren't doing it correctly. We're seeing kind of the same issues we've seen going into schools. We're seeing that they're not tracking operations correctly. They're not processing the time cards correctly. And now we're seeing it with the apprentice programs as well. So we thought, what can we do to get ahead of that? And we put together a handbook. And our staff has met with a couple different program sponsors who have helped us with that and made some changes. We'd like to meet with every program sponsor to talk to them directly about this. And so far, we've had some interest in the sponsors willing to do that. Some no interest. But one of the things I wanted to mention with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards is, for them, it's a completion of an apprenticeship program. And a completion of an apprenticeship program is just that. They've completed the program. But for us, it's completion of the program and a test to become fully licensed. When you're working in other industries, they don't have that test that they have to take. They complete their apprenticeship, and then they move on to a different classification of their employment. So there's a disconnect between those two because the Division of Apprenticeship Standards hadn't even looked at our pass rates. So when we showed them just the pass rates of our apprenticeship programs, it was, it's really low. Apprenticeship programs are running in like less than 30% pass rates overall. So, and it's a lot of people that are trying to get into those programs because it's such a different opportunity than the traditional schooling aspect. So there's a lot of work to do on our end. I definitely think that as well that this could come up during sunset. That we'll hopefully be having, various different hearings is what we're told to talk about the industry. And should definitely be on the table to talk about the apprenticeship program and how it works for this industry.
Or how it's not working.
Right.
Agreed. All right.
Is there a public comment portion?
Since there's no motion, do we still have public comment? Okay, yes, so public comment.
Okay. I'm Ken Williams once again. I have experienced a lot of students that were enrolled in apprenticeship programs. I agree with you. There are issues with the program. Very recently, a young lady came to me that was going to have her apprenticeship license expire because she wasn't able to complete the 3,200 hours, death in her family. She was told she could re-enroll into another apprenticeship program. I don't know how true that is, but it seems like there should be a caveat for someone that gets ill or some unforeseen circumstance. But she was unsure, and because she was unsure, she doesn't know if she can continue to work. And then she doesn't feel like she's qualified to take the exam either. So that's a situation that I've seen a lot of. I have a salon as well, but I don't have apprentices because of what you just stated. The passing rate is very poor. As a school owner, I've always wanted to reach out to apprentices. And I know there's a school component that's a part of the apprenticeship program. But I wonder if that component is being done in schools or outside facilities. I'm pretty sure it's outside facilities. So maybe some consideration could be made for apprentices attending traditional school for some portion of the 3,200 hours. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Good morning, Fred Jones, PPFC. So you're talking apprenticeship, you're talking scoring. These are two big issues. Obviously, they're interrelated, but they're also separate. Our association doesn't pick favorites. And we believe, given concerns that have been voiced not only through our state legislature and elected officials, but in all 50 states, about unreasonable barriers to entry, and that's certainly going to be an issue in next year's sunset, that we ought to keep as many options open for young people or people going after a second career to enter our licensed profession legally. So in theory, my organization supports continuation of apprenticeships. But in practice, we recognize there's been a lot of concerns. With the Bureau of Private Post-Secondaries, do I say it diplomatically? No, I'll just say it. Incompetence. A lot of people who wanted to start a school decided it's going to take a year for them to even look at my application. It makes no sense. So a lot of people just started an apprenticeship. And so there's been a huge increase in the number of apprenticeships. 10 years ago, there were 10. Mm-hmm. And now, approximately how many apprenticeship programs?
Over 40.
So quadrupling of the number of apprenticeship programs in the last less than 10 years. Why? And who are they? And what standards are they being held to? And much like the private post-secondary and your role, dual oversight, there's this weird dual oversight with DAS and your board. It's no way to run a popsicle stand. So in theory, we support apprenticeship, but in practice, there's been a lot of ugliness there for sure. Your board has, I'll remind you, some of your predecessors and even some of you have supported efforts to limit the 3,200 hour and how many times they can reapply for the apprenticeship license. And if they continue to fail, having to start over. So there are things you have done that I think will correct some of the abuses, because let's face it, some of these shady apprenticeships just said, get your apprenticeship license and you're set. That's it. Don't even take the licensing exam. Just keep reapplying for the apprenticeship license indefinitely. Okay. More importantly to my organization is the exam, because that's really the big population impact. That affects everybody, apprenticeship, but everybody, no matter how they're approaching licensing. And the phrase that I'll use is one sentence. We believe there should be one licensing exam with 2 parts with 1 overall pass score. That's it. Simple. Now, administratively, they could be a little bit more complicated. And I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded. It is me. But a brief history. We used to have 6 to 8 hour single-day licensing, where kids would have to bring a live model who would have to sit there for 6 or 8 hours at one location, and they would take both portions of the exam. For all the right reasons, this board decided that was just insane. Let's streamline that. So we began separating. Well, first of all, we went away from pen and paper to a computer-based written exam. And then the board decided, hey, if it's on a computer, we could offer that portion of the exam at different locations. We don't have to do it at the practical exam location. And therefore, we could process more people. All the right good intentions. We can do away with the live model and go with the mannequin. All these good intentions to streamline it. And we, as an association, supported you all along. But, the law of unintended consequence, it led to this separation of a written exam and a practical exam. And it has left a very sure perception among legislators that you actually give 2 licensing exams, which again feeds into this narrative about unreasonable barriers to entry. Why are you requiring 2 separate licensing exams? It also contradicts the current law, section 7338 of the B&P Code, that says there's basically one exam with 2 parts, and in that grading of the 2 parts, the written shall prevail. That's the phrase, the written shall prevail for purposes of grading. So, again, I'll repeat, one licensing exam with 2 parts and 1 overall pass score. However, I don't want to undermine these computer-based testing sites and the option of kids to only take one portion of the exam that they fail rather than having to retake. Because, again, in my brief history, I overlooked, you would go for 8 hours, and if you failed the overall passage, you'd have to reapply. And when I started representing this industry back in the year 2000, it took 8 months for you to get a reset for your exam. 8 months. How many kids could afford, or second career adults could afford to wait after spending full-time school for another 8 months to retake the exam? These are the reasons why we tried to streamline. We as an industry, you as a board. So I still think there's options to say, if you don't reach a certain cut score on the written, and your overall pass score didn't pass, then you can retake only that portion. So I still think you won't lose the streamline. But I do think, and I'll reiterate, this board needs to be clear. There's one licensing exam that has 2 pivotal portions, theory and practical, hands-on. But there should only be 1 overall pass score. Thank you.
So just a clarification.
Sure.
Exams are scheduled on the same day. So candidates still go to our exam sites and take both the practical and the written at the same time. We still call it a written, and that's on a computer. So everyone is scheduled for same day, and majority of those individuals take both of those portions of that test on those same days in our exam facilities. The additional locations that are spread throughout the California are predominantly used for those who have failed the written portion of the exam. Because if you're, living down in lower San Diego, you have to drive to Glendale to take that test. So if you fail just the written portion, which is mostly what they fail, they can go to a location closer to them.
Right.
A candidate can opt to not show up for their written on the day of their practical. They would be considered a no-show, and then they reapply and want to take it closer to home. But most people take that exam on the same day.
I appreciate the clarification. I try to give a thumbnail history because I also left out that you adopted NIC during that time, which also streamlined the exam. So thank you for that clarification.
Christy, will we have enough time to have an October meeting, have it brought to the board for in a resolution form so we can deal with the concept of a single cut score on what we're doing? We'll have enough time to review it.
I think so.
We've been talking about it for a long
Yes.
time. It'd be nice to just
Yes.
move it to the board vote.
Yes.
Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. I would also second what Fred said, because if it hadn't been for the head falling off my model during an examination, you would not even actually have me here or have had that group started. So you can prevent future interactions like me in the future if you do that. And with regard to the apprentice situation, I hope that you all will consider a couple of things from the aesthetic standpoint. We would very much benefit from having an aesthetics apprenticeship available to us in the market, because a lot of our things are very long-term skills, like lash artistry and things like that. You don't just learn how to do lash artistry in a weekend and then all of a sudden you're ready to provide a safe and beautiful set of lashes for a client. And so we would very much benefit from having an apprenticeship program involved in our industry as well. I think from the perspective of electrology, I think you would have actually an upsurge of estheticians actually going into an apprenticeship situation in electrology.
Electrology does exist right now.
I understand that. So if there was some sort of crossover that would make it appealing to the estheticians to be able to involve themselves in the electrology apprenticeship system, we could probably increase your numbers.
So keep in mind that an apprentice has to have constant supervision. Constant.
Mm-hmm.
They're not supposed to get credit if they're not being supervised. So an esthetician would then, and an apprentice has to be 3,200 hours.
Right.
So just keep those in mind when we are thinking of expanding. An esthetician would have to have constant supervision and be licensed as an apprentice for 2 years before they can work on their own.
For many estheticians to get the money to own that electrology equipment, which is in the $20,000 range, you'd say. Yeah, it would probably take us about 2 years to be able to save that kind of coin and continually be working in order to be licensed as an electrologist, because we have to be able to have that equipment in order to get the license itself. So there's a lot of opportunity for crossover and for support of the electrology license that I think that you will see from the hair removal specialists in the aesthetics. So, thank you.
So, Christy, I just have a quick question. In talking about an apprentice for esthetician, we're saying that you would need a licensed esthetician in that room while the facial's going on at all times.
At all times.
So that other licensed esthetician obviously couldn't be performing services as well. Whereas when we're in the salon, I could be standing doing hair next to my apprentice. So that's where the board is saying it could get a little difficult to be able to have that kind of apprentice
And in
program.
addition to enforce.
Correct. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Hi, Tona Phillips, UCB teacher trainee. May I just suggest that maybe the missing link here for the apprenticeship program is the leadership. Maybe a permit needs to be obtained for the person that is hosting the apprenticeship program. Therefore, there is a responsibility and accountability. I don't understand why it should be more hours. I think that equivalent hours, as far as a school institution, should be viable, but it is absolutely necessary for the person to receive the information and be able to retain it. And that might be the issue of why these externships are not passing. Apprenticeships. Thank you. That is all. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Okay, if nothing else from the board, then I'm going to move on from this agenda item. All right. So agenda item number 8, legislative update.
Well, now we're at AB5.
And we're back.
We're back. So AB5 is our first piece of legislation that we have today. And I will just make a comment that, again, it did include a booth rental provision. It no longer does now. What it requires of our licensees, it basically takes our board out of it in a sense completely. We don't have any operational impact to AB5, but obviously it impacts our industry greatly. And again, it refers to our individuals as workers. And one of the biggest concerns is it mentions a worker providing hairstyling. It doesn't mention cosmetology. We don't license hairstylists, so that would be almost impossible to implement for anyone. And it talks about barber. They did include electrologists and estheticians and natural hair braiding. And then it also it sets the provision still of what requires or what is included in being an independent contractor, which is setting their own rates, setting their own hours, has their own book for business and schedules their own appointments and uses their own funds to purchase their supplies and maintains their own business license, which I interpret to be like a county or city business license, not an establishment license. So, and that is all that is included for our licensees at this time in the current version of the bill.
Christy, is this bill for other industries as well?
Yes.
Okay. So what are they encompassing, do you know of?
What other
industries?
I don't, but I can tell you that several members in our audience today were at a recent hearing, and it was a huge hearing with public participation, and it was a predominantly Uber, Lyft, truck drivers.
Unions. I see here.
Yeah.
It states it as healthcare professional, registered securities broker, dealers, investment advisors, drug sales, real estate. Makes sense. I can see that being huge.
The hearing was
yeah
huge.
Yeah. But obviously we need to talk about how this is going to affect ours.
Right.
Got it.
So, I've been processing.
Right. Start us off.
So, with AB5, it would have a huge impact on our industry. And keeping in mind our conversations around, our licensees and the importance of them preparing for their future. I'm also keeping in mind not only working in this industry, but knowing that on the board, our primary job is the consumer protection. And so in our industry, our licensees, at this point, we have a number of opportunities once we do graduate from school. You can go into a salon that is employee-based, and there are those salon owners who do offer that for licensees. The majority of our licensees do operate as booth renters or independent contractors. And so I do support that this exemption exists because there's so many licensees who would be impacted and so many business owners who would be impacted. And so I know that the discussion around a booth rental license was something that came up a couple of years ago when I first got onto the board. And I was in support of it then, and I support it now, because what it does, especially in light of this Dynamex decision, is what has happened over the past, I would say like 5-6 years, is the salon suites has become very, very popular. So this provides another opportunity for licensees to be independent, but to own their own salons within a larger co-working space. And so for those salon owners who currently rent their booths, if we are offered this exemption, what it allows is it allows the salon owner to, in a way, function like a suite owner, someone who just goes in, they buy a space, and they have these co-working spaces where you have individual establishment license. And so it will support the salon owner or the establishment owner who has a salon, has these booth renters, and then it also supports our new fine regulations, which separates who should get fined. Is it the establishment owner or the individual licensee? And so the booth rental license will help support that particular fine schedule, because it will identify the booth renter, and then it will distinguish the booth renter from the establishment owner. Additionally, I think that being in the industry and knowing how important it is for us to think about our financial future and our legacy, as a board, I feel that us being aware of that just opens up more opportunity for other individuals in the industry to provide education for our licensees about that, about the importance of preparing for retirement, for setting aside income. I was fortunate enough to be able to receive that education, and I know that financial literacy and financial education is really, really important. As a board, knowing that the majority of our licensees in California do function as booth renters and independent contractors, this would significantly affect those business owners and those individuals who work in the space. So I think we should, and being in the industry, I charge myself to educate as many individuals as possible in the same way that we put out information for licensees to understand their rights as workers and other things, that we can provide information and resources on where they can get that information. But in order for the individuals, looking at the statistics that we even have in our packets today, and knowing that there are 32% of our licensees who work part-time. And I know that a lot of individuals, again, they enter into the industry so that they can have that independence and they can have that flexibility. And oftentimes there are a lot of licensees who do multiple things. They're artists. And so oftentimes hairstyling, skincare, nail care, that's part of their artistry amongst other things that they're doing, and they need and want that flexibility. So these are some of my initial thoughts about it. And let me just see. And yeah, I think, again, education in the schools, making resources available to students, to salon owners. The booth rental permit will assist with that distinction and continue to support the individuals and the businesses that are currently functioning and operating this way, at least within the current climate. Because I think if this changes right now, it would significantly impact so many people who are working and who own businesses.
So just to comment on, and this is my understanding of the Dynamex case as well as AB5. The 3-part test doesn't actually take away the ability for people to operate as booth renters. And I feel like how we've talked about AB5 and these exemptions is that we either get exemptions to allow the industry to continue working as it is, or we don't have those exemptions and then this industry is not able to work that way anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think that the AB5, what AB5 does is codify Dynamex, which does the 3-part test. And as long as businesses follow that test and comply with that, they are still able to operate as booth renters or independent contractors. It's just a little bit stricter in terms of what that relationship looks like. And so that's my understanding of this bill.
I was going to ask, so for clarity, because I was reading in the bill, page 6 and 7. So the exemption for our licensees, right now what I see is that, we have this test that they set their own hours, they book their own services, they use their own money to purchase their own supplies. With this written in the bill, it would, as long as those individuals in the business are doing these things, they are exempt from being classified as employees.
So this is what I'm actually confused by with this language, is that I feel like it's actually more restrictive in terms of how you would actually need to operate in order to not fall under the three-part test. And to me, the three-part test is actually simpler in terms of distinguishing between whether or not you are considered a worker versus an independent contractor. So I actually don't fully understand what kind of benefits this exemption language actually gives to our business owners.
Well, no, go ahead. When I look at the three-part test, and I know Part B says, does the worker perform work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business? And I know that is where it creates conflict for the salon owner who rents their booths, because everyone in the salon is performing hair services. And so with that particular three-part test, and I'm putting myself back in salon owner Carrie who have booth renters. And so if I have somebody come in and I have my 6 booth renters and they're paying me booth rent, we're all doing hair, then I would be identified as someone who should actually have them classified as an employee. As opposed to when I look at the way that it's broken down, where as a salon owner who had booth renters, my booth renters had access to the salon 24/7. I didn't book their clients. I didn't collect money. I didn't tell them how much to charge. They were responsible for their supplies. As the salon owner, I took care of the leasehold and, maintained the space.
Right. So actually at the Health and Safety Committee, there was someone from DIR who actually kind of helped me think through this a little bit clearer in terms of compliance. This is a 3-part test, and actually Part A specifically asks, is the worker free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in the performance of the work? I believe in the Dynamex case, it was actually because the drivers did not actually have autonomy in terms of scheduling and could not actually select what types of clients or what time they could actually work. And so the person from DR actually mentioned, and coming from government, I did work in the controller's office. And this would, of course, not be the case if there was a lawsuit filed. I don't know what a court of law would actually look at. But when looking at compliance from that point of view, it really is about whether or not all 3 of these parts are in play. So given the situation that you're discussing, in which you may have a clearly written contract that states the relationship, and you actually are not forcing your booth renter or whoever it is that you are, that is an independent contractor, they keep their own schedule, they can refuse clients. I think that fulfills Part A. So that's my understanding of this. Again, it's, I think, difficult to say unless it was actually a real situation that was being actually reviewed by the agency which would be in charge of this.
Yeah, I think it's Part B and C that creates a conflict for the salon owner in California who operates their business as a booth rental, because everyone in the space, in a barbershop, in a hair salon, in a skincare establishment, they're all performing the same services. And I feel like that's where the conflict would arise, so that when I read the actual AB5 and I see the more detailed description as far as the exemption of, like, okay, salon owners, of course I'm thinking, because I'm a salon owner. If as long as these particular criteria are being followed, then you won't have to, identify or classify the individuals in your establishment as an employee. And although there are more criteria, I feel that the detail in this criteria, the way that it's laid out, provides a lot of clarity for the salon owner or for the individual who currently owns an establishment, and maybe the changes they might have to make, or the individual who is coming into the industry and they plan to open up a salon, to understand how they would need to set up their business in this fashion.
I see what you're saying on that completely. And in going through this, we've done some with Veda in our industry. We did a lot of, my attorney came in and we did some symposiums around this ABC. And so one of the things that a salon owner could do is now call their salon whatever salon, but the way they set up their business within that is where that, but it then still comes back to the establishment license of where you can't get around from each individual in their booth
And
rental.
that's where that booth rental permit would be
I
beneficial.
totally understand what you're saying, but then the other side of it is, what about all the people out there who have salons, nail salons, whatnot? What are we doing to protect those people who work in those environments, who are being labeled this, but they're really not being treated that? Because then we're just allowing them by AB5 to continue not protecting the individuals.
Well, like in a nail salon, and I know that we've had a lot of issues around nail salons and like the labor laws around
Right.
manicurists who are taken advantage of in that industry. I think looking at this criteria that's listed, if this criteria isn't followed, then those individuals would be held accountable, those salon owners or those establishment owners who have nail salons. Because if those individuals, if those manicurists aren't able to set their own hours, if they're not booking their own appointments, if they don't have the right to refuse service, then those individuals are
Right.
employees.
True, but I mean, knowing what we know now, when you just said, how many people were reporting their income as licensed individuals out of the 600,000?
65?
That's actually the total of all five occupation codes.
65,000 out of 600?
Yeah.
So that's scary, because then we're allowing that to open up. We're continuing to do what we've already been doing. Like, at least Diamex does some protection. Now we're saying, no, forget you, Diamex. Let's go ahead and open this back up, but it's already such a huge problem. I think we're just, in my opinion, I see what you're saying. Like, how can we do both? I just don't, I feel like if we allow this or support it, I mean, they're gonna do whatever. But I understand too, we have to put language in there because it's still gonna happen of how to protect our industry.
Right, and I just feel that policy, and even for our board, we have always looked at things through the lens of worst case scenario and not best case scenario. And I feel like what you're describing is a best case scenario where people are actually following whatever is being set out as booth runners. But as we see from the labor statistics, people are not following any rules. And even for people to choose actively to work in a booth rental situation as independent contractors, like I just don't think that people are actually going to comply in terms of what AB5 and Dynamex is actually ultimately about, which is, whether or not they're even reporting. That's not really going to change what I think what we're discussing, which is this huge discrepancy between 60,000 people who are listed at a federal level under these 5 different occupation codes versus our 600,000 licensees. I don't know that that's in the best interest of the industry, and I think there needs to be a conversation about how do we allow for innovation in this industry, allow for entrepreneurship. I just don't know that that's going to be done in one conversation and in one bill that's going to encourage what I think are going to be exploitative practices for the industry. So I understand what you're saying, Dr. Karen. I think it is really complex, and I don't know that dedicating one board meeting to the conversation is enough. And I don't know that we've heard enough from the industry itself to make that decision on behalf of everyone by supporting this language to move forward without input from more people, from more public, business owners, workers, independent contractors, everyone. And I'm not just saying that because I obviously am against the exemptions for labor protection purposes. But I think that also, if we do allow this language to move forward, it will not be looked at positively by legislators during our sunset review. Because I do think that this type of language signals to legislators that this industry would not care, does not take into account the workers' rights issues that we have actually been charged to look at, especially from the Health and Safety Committee's viewpoint. And I know that bill is coming up later in this legislative package, but Glazer's office has a bill renewing the Health and Safety Committee, and in it explicitly lists labor. So I know that the legislators will be looking at this. So I have a number of concerns.
Do they have the information though about this? I think it's just such a huge one with the 65,000 reporting out of 600,000. Do they have, I mean, I would assume that they take that into consideration when looking at this.
I don't know that those are numbers that they've looked at for.
Oh, well, just saying.
Quick questions. First of all, our current status is watch on this, correct? And are we saying, are you implying, are you saying if we don't change it from a watch to support if amended, whatever, is that's going to reflect poorly on us in sunset?
So we had.
It's like take a stand or you're in trouble kind of a thing?
Well, what the issue is right now is we have a motion that has been proposed by the Health and Safety Committee that is very specific. And that motion asks the board to request language changes to 85. And those language changes are specific to the exemption that is in there. So I think there's a few things we need to do. Is first we need to address the motion from the Health and Safety Committee regarding what action we want to take on what's been recommended to us by them. Maybe that's something we need to do first, and then move on to a different decision in terms of what we actually think about AB5.
I guess the other question I quickly just had, and that's more of the political aspect of it, is that currently it's sitting in Senate Finance, if I'm correct. Appropriations.
Right.
Will it be taken? Would it be put on the calendar, or do we think it's going to move in this session, or do we think it's going to be continued? So I see someone nodding their head that they think it's going to go. So all right, so we do need to. It's not something we can. Not going to become a 2-year to discuss. Okay.
So we need, right, like it's going to move, so we need to put something in it, or else we'll have nothing in it.
Or we'd just still have our watch.
Well, the language as it stands right now has exemption language in it that is specific to barbers, electrologists, estheticians, or worker providing natural hair braiding. But the motion from the Health and Safety Committee asks us as a board to include manicurists, which is currently not in the exemption language. So there were a number of asks from the motion, which is to change the language of worker to licensees, adding verbiage regarding professional license in Section E, and then requesting that all occupational licenses be included with the exemption. So that is specifically the motion that's coming from Health and Safety. In addition to approaching policymakers on the final permits.
So the question on that I still had in the previous section is just, do we know why it was struck previously? I mean, it'd be easiest for us to approach. Obviously, there's a reason why it was, struck down. And if we're not going to, if it's because the author says no, we can approach all we want. It might not get us anywhere.
I think we should take this motion. It's already a motion that's been made.
Open up to
and
public
open
comment.
it up to public comment. And then once we discuss that, have the public comment, board members can discuss, you can vote on that motion, and then we can take a position that's going to kind of go hand in hand with what we want to do on AB5.
Okay.
Because I think before we Because I think the other part of the motion, the engage AB5 author, at least points 1 and 2 there seem to be grammatical, as opposed to
So on
Policy-ish,
number 2, on the
correct?
section E, so section E right now says maintains their own business license in connection with the services offered to clients. And the committee wanted really, the business license, it doesn't say that they have to maintain their cosmetology license. So
okay.
so that's what we're referring to with the professional license, is their
But
individual
that's not,
license as well.
that to me doesn't seem controversial, we'll put it that way. I think the controversial is the booth permit and the request all occupational licenses to be included with the exemption. I think those are
For sure.
those are the two okay, just wanted clarity
Is that
for myself on all that.
there's no way that we can just even ask to be exempt from this completely?
As in removing the exemption language?
Like, that our industry isn't a part of this bill?
That's
And we're
I think we will
staying
get
with
there.
Dymex?
We will get to that to be able to be a motion should this board want to go in that direction.
I was just asking if that's an
Yes.
option to ask, if you just, if completely taken out of it.
Yes.
And then we wouldn't, even if this bill passed, our industry
Correct.
wouldn't be affected by it. We would fall back on Dymex.
Well, there might be one vote against sunset renewal if we do that.
I'm just
but
asking.
Yes.
All right, public comments.
Fred Jones, Professional Beauty Federation, California. It may surprise the president that I agreed with her sentiments entirely. However,
Always the however.
politics is the art of compromise, and the legislature is definitely a sausage mill, and so it's never pretty. The motion before you is to make an ugly situation less ugly. If you fail to vote for that motion, then an alternative motion could be, let's have a perfect world where there's no booth renters. Everybody's protected by the labor code. And that's really kind of where you're at. Do you try to engage to make something that's ugly less ugly? Or, with all due respect, do you fantasize about a world that could be, that I would argue will never be? The toothpaste is out of the tube on booth rental. As much as I'm willing to say publicly on behalf of my organization that booth rental on net has been a net negative to our industry. Your mission is to protect the clients of our services. My organization's mission is to raise the professionalism of the industry. Booth rental on net has diminished the professionalism of our industry, not just because of the tax evasion, which has all sorts of implications for student loans, career counseling, et cetera, huge negative impacts and implications. But if you're willing to risk a felony to tax evade, you're clearly willing to risk a monetary sanction by the state board on health and safety violations. So it has a direct implication to your mission. It certainly has a direct implication to my association's mission. And it's been a negative net. That doesn't mean every booth rental establishment is illegitimate. And again, much like apprenticeship, my association supports all legitimate forms of businesses, and booth rental is a legitimate form. Dynamex, it's my legal opinion, that the Part B test of Dynamex makes what we do in our industry illegal, with maybe a very small section of real estate venture capitalists who rent out space to businesses. Hot dog stands, frozen yogurt shops, and beauty salons. But if you're actually in the business of hair or skin or nails, then anyone working in that place of your business will be swept up by Dynamex. So there really won't be booth rental if you embrace Dynamex in its entirety. Now, again, let me reiterate, I agreed with every one of your sentiments that you started this meeting with. The question is, what's doable? What's possible? And you said, we often focus on the darker angels of our nature. I think some of you may not realize the depths of the darkness potential. Most salons, if Dynamex became the rule, and we don't have an exemption, will continue to do what they're doing. And may get worse. They may stop even asking for a license from your state board. I don't think you've really looked at the depths of the darkness of human capacity. So, it's our opinion, and let me state one other statement. I applauded Dynamex because we need clarity. When the Healthy Nails Collaborative came online a few years ago and was talking about workers being exploited, in all candor, I kind of laughed him off because all those workers were not employees. They were sole proprietors, independent contractors. You can't, by definition, be exploited by your employer if you're independent of them. So they are being consistent when they have now changed to misclassification being the problem. And the fact that they want to force the purity of Dynamex, the clarity of Dynamex, to me is a very consistent position that they're taking. I just don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle, to throw in another metaphor. And so what do we have before us? We have a bill that seeks to provide limited exemption to certain industry sectors. I took the initial position on behalf of my organization to say, we're taking a pass. We don't want an exemption for the industry. Let's bring the clarity of Dynamex upon this industry once and for all. And then I was amazed to get called into the offices of Black Caucus members who said this will put out of business my black barbershops, which are the hub of our communities. That's not going to happen on my watch. And other legislators started telling me the same thing. And then I heard from Lorena Gonzalez, who is more of an advocate for workers and for the labor code protections than anyone in this room. And she flat out told me, we have to give your industry an exemption because you're the loudest industry that's come to our legislature. Your industry is louder than the real estate agents, the insurance brokers, everybody else. I was shocked. I'm like, oh, crap. I guess we're going to have to deal with it then. And so knowing there was going to be an exemption given to our industry, my association engaged the author, the Labor Fed, the sponsors, and everybody else, the committee consultants, and said, okay, let's make the ugly less ugly. And that's when we, Dr. Carey, hit upon the booth rental permit. We think clarity is our best friend. If we can't attain perfection, a fantasy where everybody will be an employee and protected above board by all the labor code laws, then what can we do to at least root out the bad players? And with a booth rental permit would come a auditable list for EDD, DIR, Cal OSHA, everybody. Here's a list of people that are claiming they're booth renters. Here's a list of salons that claim they have booth renters. Have at them. We thought that was the best approach. They accepted those amendments in the Assembly. When it went to the Labor Committee in the Senate, the chief consultant of the Labor Committee and the chair decided we don't want to get in the business vis-a-vis AB5 of picking winners and losers in the BMP code, which deals with specific industries. So the Barbering Cosmetology Act is in the BMP code. We want AB5 to focus on labor law and the labor code that applies to all workers, specifically employees of employers. So the fact that we're asking them to recognize BMP code sections and to create a new booth rental permit within the Barbering Cosmetology Act, that was a bridge too far for the Labor Committee in the Senate. So instead of a booth rental permit and a reference to the state board, they said, well, each booth renter will have to have their own business license, a separate business license, which would be promulgated from a local municipality, a county or city. And that way it stays in the labor code and it still applies across all industry sectors. So that's kind of the technical response to your question earlier.
Just out of curiosity,
Please.
was that decision made post the committee meeting or prior to that? And timeline?
The Health Advisory Committee?
Yes.
It was made way before.
Okay.
And I don't think they would have cared, frankly, what our Health Advisory
Well, no, but
said.
so the decision to pull the booth permit, which came out of the Senate Labor, was post the Health and Safety Committee meeting?
It was pre. The decision was made way before.
Okay,
the Health
okay.
and Safety.
Just trying to.
Now, do I think they're wedded to that in the Senate? Not necessarily. But I'm just telling you, they were trying to keep it as simple as possible.
So it has the business license is what their language is now.
Right.
Versus rental
It's in AB 5,
permit.
the requirement for a separate business license. Okay, just running through here.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. The issue of hairstylist. That problem arose when the author decided, given the New York Times stories, given Healthy Nails Collaborative concerns, that there was too much exploitation of primarily Vietnamese nail workers. So she wasn't willing to go there when it came to manicuring. Well, cosmetology is the umbrella that includes manicuring services. So what do you do with that? And that's when they divined this legislative sausage mill. They churned out a new term, hairstyling. So that's their way to try to avoid encompassing all the services of cosmetology. Again, it isn't pretty, it's ugly. But my association believes we should treat all sectors equally. So if one sector is going to get an exemption, we believe all sectors should be given the same exemption. I do believe that AB 5 is the only game in town right now to engage. I do believe that even if AB 5 passes, and there's no guarantee it will, by mid-September when they adjourn, and the governor signs it by the end of October. Even if all that happens, I guarantee you there will be cleanup legislation next year. And from my conversations with Lorena Gonzalez's staff, that will also include our industry. So I don't think AB 5 is the only bite at the apple, but that's potential future. I do believe right now AB 5 is the only bite at the apple. I do think there is sunset implications, potentially. If your board tells those Black Caucus members, pound sand, we think all those barbershops are illegal and they're just going to have to clean up or close up, that could have sunset implications.
Do they know that only 65,000 out of the 600,000 are reporting their income?
I think it's a telling number. We've been saying that forever as an association. Unfortunately, it often falls on deaf ears.
Interesting.
What they're going to hear is their black barber owner, shop owner, telling them, I'm going to close business if I have to cover workers' comp, FICA, and all the other things for all of my barbers. That's what they're going to hear.
But they pay taxes. Don't they want everybody to pay taxes?
You know where I stand.
I know.
I don't disagree
Just
with you.
having this conversation, just curious.
They have heard from our industry. We were the loudest industry. An exemption was inevitable. That was the message I was told. And so therefore we engaged.
Okay.
I made the motion at the Health and Safety Advisory Committee. The motion was to clean up the current exemption language. I think it's an appropriate, responsible response to AB 5. But I don't hold it against any member of this board that says, you know what, booth rental is a net negative. I'm not going to be associated with it. And so I just think we should be completely out of AB 5, which means there would be no exemption for our industry from Dynamax. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak on behalf of the sole
State your
proprietors.
name though for the record.
Caroline Barboza, Barboza Barber Academy. If it wasn't for the fact that I am a sole proprietor and I'm going to open a barber college, it's easier for them to lend me money to to obtain my own building because I have my own business. And if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't get a small business loan. So it's been, and plus the fact that being a sole proprietor gives me the freedom to go to classes, to come to meetings such as this. It's helped me to grow, and I've been in the business 30 years also, so it's been a blessing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Natasha Alexander, and I have been a stylist for 32 years. And initially, my career was to be an attorney. Now, for whatever reason that didn't happen, I did not become a cosmetologist to make $10 an hour when the owner of the salon is making $300-400 on one client. So, to your point with regulating or deregulating renting, I rent, and I've always rented. And I rent because I want to make money. I did not become a cosmetologist to not make money, and certainly not to make $10-15 an hour. So trying to regulate renters for the purpose of taxes, I think what for the most part always is the problem is education. When new cosmetologists come out of school, they have no idea about not necessarily taxes, and it is their responsibility, but most of any college student comes out to work, they go and they work for someone, whereas their taxes are basically reported from the company. Whereas stylists, they have to do all of this on their own, and in cosmetology school, they don't teach this. So I think the gap in reporting is education. They have no idea that they have to do all of this to report. I don't think it is a lack of not reporting because they intentionally want to do it. You're always going to have those bad actors, but I think the lack of reporting is education. They don't know. That's what I feel. If they were taught that they had to come into the industry and report taxes, because if you do report taxes, that is the way for you to sustain a decent life after you retire. Who wants to not have money when they retire? Who wants to not have money? I believe it's a lack of education if that was enforced in the schools, that you need to pay taxes to be able to retire and to live a decent life. But as a renter, I didn't get into this industry to make $15 an hour. I just didn't. I want to be a renter. I want to stay a renter. And I, to your point, where or several of you said that it is killing our industry. I don't believe that. I absolutely don't believe that, because we're always going to have that element of bad actors in whatever industry that do not report taxes. But my point is, that gap is, I think, lack of informity of the taxes, of what we report, how we report. And if they knew it, I think more would do it. I don't think it's for just to not report because they want to escape the laws. I just absolutely don't believe that. Did you say 66%?
65,000 out of 600,000
Okay,
have
so
reported their income.
And so do you think the majority of those people just are skating it just because they want to,
We've got
intentionally?
550,000.
I
do own 4 salons.
Yes.
And I don't pay my people $15 an hour. People who work for me make $150,000 a year.
Okay.
So there's many salons out there that are employee-based that don't pay their people a minimum wage.
So
They
that's-
pay them
that's-
really high incomes.
I understand that.
So
That's
not
your-
all employee-based are trying to take advantage of the service provider. So this is just what Lisa had stated, what she had found in her findings of reported income. So I'm just
my
stating
my
the
point
way.
is, do you think that huge amount, that huge number, is because they intentionally do not want to report that?
I don't think
I don't
anyone
think so.
has said that it's intentional.
No. What I'm saying is,
So-
I'm proposing the question to you. Do you think that is intentional? Because I don't think so. I think it is a lack of education. That's what I believe.
I couldn't say what, it could be a combination of many things.
I agree with you. I
Sure.
agree with you, but I don't think that huge number, they're intentionally trying to escape paying taxes.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Jamie Schrabeck, Precision Nails, and I've been in the industry long enough to have to wear these glasses to share this with you. As a licensed manicurist and owner of an employee-based nail salon, I respectfully request that AB 5 be amended further to eliminate the imprecise, discriminatory, and unenforceable language regarding beauty professionals. Because the Barbering and Cosmetology Act requires that any person compensated for providing services regulated by the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology have a, quote, valid, unexpired license, this bill must reference the BBC. Unless the legislature intends to endorse unlicensed activity, any mention of workers should be replaced by the appropriate and statutory license titles: cosmetologist, barber, manicurist, esthetician, and electrologist. Note that the phrase natural hair braiding is included in the current language, but those services, as we know, are exempt from BBC licensure. That's a discussion for another day. Yet it's listed among the exemptions. To protect the most exploited among us, all BBC licensees must be treated equally. The exclusion of manicurists and cosmetologists who provide nail care services cannot be justified when misclassification, wage theft, and tax evasion happen across all of our licensing categories and business types, from discount nail salons to luxury spas. Restricting employment options will create barriers to entry, limit business opportunities, and I am so grateful for your comments about getting a loan and being able to grow in this industry. Thank you for that. And it will depress the wages of manicurists even further and result in more unlicensed activity and unfair competition. Requiring that an independent business owner charge rates equal to or greater than 2 times the minimum wages for hours worked cannot be taken seriously. And that's currently in the language. And I think I know why that's there, because that's something that the author said during that hearing that I attended. And I'm paraphrasing, but she said essentially that she doesn't worry about you if you're making double the minimum wage. I still worry, because that doesn't mean that everything's being done correctly. That doesn't mean that your taxes are being withheld appropriately or that you're being paid overtime necessarily. And we already have that law. That's a different subject as well. Beyond being unenforceable, such a requirement does not resolve the biggest problem with our industry: lack of compliance with existing tax and labor laws. And the two things are linked, but they are somewhat slightly different. And I can understand where, Ms. Crabtree, you're focusing on tax evasion with rental. Yes, but with rental, and the misclassification concerns deal with workers. I can totally understand how both are a concern. But the legislature should prioritize education and enforcement of the laws that we already have, so that salon owners and licensees have more resources and reasons to bear the financial burden of compliance. And it is a burden, not only financially, but just in terms of the paperwork. Let me add that I'm very supportive of a booth rental permit for the purposes of transparency and accountability, both legal and financial. A distinction needs to be made between licensees who operate as booth renters within a licensed establishment and those who are employed by the establishment owner. We cannot expect consumers, who we're supposed to be taking care of here with all of our laws, to make informed decisions about who they support and choose qualified individuals and legitimate businesses if they cannot verify both the individual operator's license and essentially their booth rental employment status. I'm not going to take the word for it from a salon owner that they pay their people. There's no certificate or award that shows that you paid your taxes, or that you filled out that survey and gave it to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a different thing from actually filing your taxes and paying your taxes. If not amended, AB 5 will adversely affect the beauty industry, the rights of its duly licensed professionals, and the ability of the BBC to protect the public and exercise its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. And let me just add with that, I was in that same meeting with Fred, and I also seconded his motion. And I would be just as happy to have us completely taken out of AB 5. I want us taken together. So whatever happens to any of us needs to happen to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd be remiss in my duty. Ken Williams, Universal College. if I didn't point to Jamie and Fred and say, good job for all the years. I want to say decades that they've been instrumental in giving good advice to the board. You need good advice. Whether to regulate booth rental or not is a big choice. I don't even know why it's on this board's plate. It sounds financial to me. Doesn't adhere to the mission statement of this state board. I don't believe it does. I think it's outside on the fringe. So how you decide, when you decide is important. But this field has created more wealth for women than any other thing you can name. It's a great field. It created an opportunity. In an imbalanced society, it's kind of been a shining star. If we regulate it to the point, it's like me asking the question, who in here has ever jaywalked or broken some law? Sometimes laws don't help because they're overburdensome, and they, as Fred mentioned, I know someone that's actually closed their barbershop because of the rumors of AB 5. Just the rumors was that, oh no more independent operators, and barbershop, all the barbers walked out. So I don't know if that's a solution. I don't really think it is. So I agree, you need to take your time and look at all the aspects that are in this law and see if it's going to be a plus or a minus.
Thank you.
Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. Here's how it goes. Gal can't find a job in an employment-based situation in a salon. So she decides she's going to go ahead and rent or share rent in some sort of room. And then that's not kind of working out for her for whatever reason, or she's being pushed out because the management is overstepping where their level of control is by saying you have to offer a $45 facial, and if you don't, then I'm going to kick you out of here on a contract that is, written on a paper bag and is hardly ever enforceable. Okay. You have to sell my products. You can't sell your own products. There's all these overreaches that happen with I wish there were more businesses like Jackie and like Jamie are running out in the industry, but that is not always the thing. So they go out and they rent their room, and then they get into trouble, and then they have to go to Granny and say, I need $5,000 to sustain myself because I can't even pay my rent at home. These are the conversations that I have every single day backstage on my Facebook group of people. And it's not only the school's responsibility to teach us how to run a business. It is our responsibility to run a business and to seek out those organizations that will help us. So score.org is one of the first pieces of advice I give anybody in this group, is to reach out to somebody outside of the beauty business in order to learn how to run an actual business, because we do not have it right in this industry. We really don't. There's no enforcement going on right now. When you look at it, there's no enforcement of AB 1513 that was initiated and implemented in 2016 that says that you can't be paid commission anymore. None of it. It's still out there constantly. I'm getting on my group, I'm getting paid commission 50%. What do I do? So that's still going on out there. They're completely ignoring all of these laws. The Senate Bill number 490, the double minimum wage, somewhere tucked into that language. No one really knows how that bill actually works because it's not enforceable. It's not doable by the numbers, but it's now being weaponized by the employees or the independent contractors saying that you have to pay me double minimum wage because I read it somewhere. Somebody told me you're supposed to. And then they don't, and then they peace out and they start their own booth rental, and then that goes into that bad cycle again. One of the things that happens after all this, and they're having a problem, is they go to the DIR or they go to the EDD and they ask for help. And they say, I think that I have a wage claim. And the wage claim, when I look at it, is pretty laid out. And they get the 800 number, similar to, when we call in to any DCA, 800 number. We have a bank of people that are answering the phones. And by the second or third sentence into their hour wait on the phone, they hear, well, we understand that you are just an independent business that operates within those businesses, so you're really not an employee. Thank you very much for calling. Good luck out there. So we really don't have support from a labor violation. And this is not just labor violations that go with the manicurists only. These are labor violations. My group is almost exclusively with one mole that's sitting right there. One person in my group, they are all licensed estheticians, and we talk about labor violations all day long. All day long. So it's not just one license category that has that problem. The other thing that's kind of messy about what's going on with AB5 is 1/4 of your aesthetics licensees are also manicurists in licensure. So if you have 88,000, we have 19,000, almost 20,000 that are licensed as manicurists. And those were actual statistics that are pulled from the board. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do a facial, and then I'm going to ask Pam to grab her stuff. And then we're going to go down to the street where I'm an actual employee, and I'm going to clock in, and we're going to get you your manicure. Does that sound practical to you? No. It's going to force all of us into a situation of blatantly violating these laws again. Or just say, forget it, and I'm going to work out of my garage again or my back bedroom and to set up my unlicensed activity there. The other number that I don't have statistically is a large percentage of our licensed categories that are also massage therapists. Massage therapists and aesthetics come hand in hand. That's how a lot of them started, and they ended up becoming estheticians and becoming licensees of this board. So now all those people, they do some sort of a facial and some sort of a body treatment and some sort of a massage as their service. But what are they going to, they're not being employed by the salon that they're renting the back room from. So those people are all going to be in labor violation. But what's nice about their license or their certification qualifications, they can go out to an individual's house and just take their show on the road and perform those services in that individual's house, because those CMT folks, they can work anywhere. So now the chatter is, then I'll just take my facial stuff with me and go over to Pam's house and do her stuff there. So the separation and not including of everybody in the bill is actually going to drive things very in chat and the noise that I hear in my group is just going to be driving everybody into illegal spaces anyways, which is already a huge problem that you guys are fighting. So I think that it's a big consideration for everybody to think about all of the situations and not just the fact that we're being called workers. That's kind of odd to me. We're all licensed professionals, all of us. You spend 400 hours, you spend 1,600 hours. We are licensed professionals. We are not workers. And also, if we leave the manicurist behind, if I have an opportunity to take my manicurist that I know is maybe in a bad situation and could be easily taken with me to my salon right now and help her get off her, out of that situation and on her feet on her own, I couldn't, because my salon's probably not going to hire her as an employee. But she has all her stuff. She has all of her clients. She has an opportunity for us to, put our hand out and help her out of a bad situation and get her onto her feet as a female business owner and independent from shady situations that we know are in the industry. And this bill, the way it is written currently, will prevent us from being able to help that person. So I know you guys have I have a personal opinion on the bill, and I also have an organizational opinion on the bill. I will go on record and say my personal opinion as Wendy Cochran, just Wendy Cochran, licensed esthetician, is burn it to the ground. We don't ask for the exemption. From an organizational standpoint, I feel that there are people that are fair booth renters that this will negatively impact. And this is a chance for them to have their own businesses and then blow out to their own brick and mortar salon and be treated fairly. So the language should actually reflect BBC licensees in good standing. And that will also speak to the future of being able to just create a lash only, a wax only license, a hairstylist only license, a shampoo only license, and give us the future, because this legislation all moves so slowly. And so it gives us, equality, and it also looks into the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before the next person comes up, can I ask a quick question? Is that all right? So we've got currently on the floor the motion from the Health and Safety Advisory Committee.
Correct.
Do we know what that motion was passed by a vote? Lisa said she abstained from it. Do we know what the count was of the vote? Was it like out of the 11? Was it 6-5? Was it?
There was no votes.
There was no votes.
No
Two people
votes.
did it. I believe 2 people abstained. 3 abstained.
Okay. And then,
Did you have more questions?
I think I did, but I'm trying to think of what it was. Basically, so the committee then also at that point knew that the booth rental permit was struck from the language, and they thought that the solution of a individual business license that the legislature provided was not adequate. That's okay. I'm just
And then,
trying to clarify some things in my head.
So so if we did put in this language, how is it gonna make anything different? Because then wouldn't they still, if they have booth renters in there, the establishment owner still would be responsible?
Right.
About the booth renters. It still doesn't,
what was your question?
the establishment owner, so whatever, they have the booth renters, the establishment license is still responsible for booth renters.
Well, lots of other states have booth renters, and
No, I
they
know.
have designated common areas. So I want to say the language prior that was taken out required us to do regulations to establish a booth rental license. So there would be some work done, had that stayed in there, to establish the booth rental license, which would have included. We kind of already do that now in our new fine schedule for holding owners responsible for certain things and individuals responsible for certain things. But in the development of a booth rental license, that would have been addressed as well.
I agree. I know, but I'm saying if we were to put the language in there and we have to admit this because they're not taking it, the legislative to put in there, how's it going to make any difference? Again, I feel like we're going back to the same thing where it's the establishment owner and the booth renters. There's no difference in what it is.
Well, I think my personal opinion was the booth renter license was a game changer.
I agree.
But now that's
But now they're
taken
saying
out.
we can't do it.
Right.
So we're back to square one.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just?
Well, we still have other public comments, so I would like to hear from folks who have not spoken yet. If that's okay with the board, we're going to move forward with more public comment, please.
Good afternoon, you all. My name is Preeti Sharma, and I am speaking to you all as lead author of the UCLA study, the Labor Center report, Nail Files, which was published late last year. So I wanted to share a few brief highlights of the nail salon sector from the report itself, and I'd be happy to offer to send the board a copy of the report as well afterwards. So first, in terms of the national sector, nearly 8 out of 10 people who staff nail salons are immigrants. And of those who are foreign born, 7 out of 10 manicurists are from Vietnam. The immigrant labor force also includes folks who are Korean, Chinese, Indian, Nepali, Tibetan, and Latinx. Given the population demographics, I also wanted to highlight that of those who are immigrants, nearly half do not speak English well or at all. Second, when you compare the national employment data to the nail salon sector itself, the self-employment rate does stand out because it is triple the national rate, or where 30% of manicurists are self-employed. So because of that high rate of comparison, we are concerned that there is some misclassification of independent contractors in the industry, and that misclassification itself leads to invasion of labor laws and protections. Lastly, the industry is low wage, where someone earns $13.46 an hour or less. So our analysis in the report shows that nearly 8 out of 10 manicurists make low wages, which is significantly higher than the national rate, or more than double the national rate for low wages across all industries. Again, such wages prove challenging for manicurists, where in a high-cost state like California, it would be difficult to make ends meet. Given all of this, AB 5 would protect the largely immigrant and Vietnamese nail salon manicurist population who may not know the ins and outs of their rights of being an employee versus an independent contractor. So I'm here to say that we need to ensure quality jobs and labor protections for manicurists and guarantee workplace protections and their enforcement. So I would recommend that the board support AB 5 without exception for BBC licensees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Fu with the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative. I just wanted to share a little bit about our experience doing outreach and talking with thousands of manicurists across the state. Predominantly, most of the folks that we talk to are Vietnamese immigrant, low-wage workers, family wage earners, and really trying to get by. And like Preeti had mentioned, most are low-wage workers, and in the report you would see that also most of them have at least one child in the home, and I believe about 20 to 30% also have another a spouse or a partner also working in the working as well. In our conversations with our members and with the general community about workers' rights, about misclassification, we have found there's just really been a large lack of understanding and lack of information. So I think that's something that everybody can agree on. The information is just not there. And for us, we see the information is not there in a way that an immigrant or refugee could understand. In language, not super technical. I'm graduate school, like a lot of this information is also very technical for me. Even the AB5 stuff is very confusing. So I've taken a lot of time to try and understand all the details. So let alone, providing information around know your rights to workers and owners when they have received it from us in Vietnamese, 100% of the time they say, I had no idea. Both the manicurists and the owners, the folks that are running the salon, in terms of how workers are supposed to be classified. And we actually have done focus groups with some of our owner members, letting them know about really the ins and outs of the 1099 versus W-2. And 80% of the owners that we've talked to have said, oh, we actually aren't classifying folks correctly. And those are just the people that we're able to reach, right? And those are the people that are actually being honest and saying that they're not classifying correctly. I've talked with other legal agencies that have said, of the folks that they've done intake with, they would say 99% of their manicurists they're talking to are being misclassified. And so not only is there a language access issue, there's a lack of knowledge that we feel like we're able to do a small part in providing the education and information that is needed. And when we have talked with owners about this as well, in terms of the need to classify correctly, a lot of them say, well, I can be doing the right thing, but everybody else, no one else is doing the right thing. So if I make a change, like how is that going to be a big impact? And so they've actually said, why don't you raise the wages for manicurists should be at a higher level. Misclassification across the board should be at a higher level for all nail salons. It should be a requirement for all nail salons to do these things, not just for me to make the small change, because that's not enough. They felt like they, as individuals, aren't powerful enough to make that much of a difference. Organizations across the country, the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative is the only organization across the country that works specifically around issues that are impacting manicurists. And I get calls all the time about this happening in other states. And what are you all doing about it? What's California doing about it in terms of really addressing this issue of misclassification? And I'm able to say, our state board has really done a lot in terms of language access, really improved over the years, and this is something we still need to work on. And so for us, another piece is around the economic justice issue, which Lisa Tong talked about a bit, where being low-wage workers, and this is a sensitive topic, for immigrant families, being low-wage workers, it's hard to generate wealth. And so what ends up happening is that children of low-wage workers end up supporting their parents because their parents came here as immigrants, aren't aware of how they're supposed to be treated, or maybe have cultural fear of, we hear a lot about cultural, fear of doing something that may cause attention to them, because when they spoke up in their home countries, it was a reason to get to be in trouble. And so culturally, that may be why you don't see a lot of Vietnamese immigrants and refugees here speaking up about what they feel like they deserve, because in their home country it was a reason for punishment. And they're also just folks are working, right? And so the lack of generating wealth for low-income families impacts generations. And in our work, we also talk to a lot of young people and a lot of students in various departments at colleges and universities that are in an Asian American Studies department, public health schools, about the work that we do. And every single presentation or training we give, at least one student will come up to me and say, "Oh, my mom or my dad is a salon worker, and I had no idea that this is what they were facing." And then I have friends who are my age or acquaintances whose parents were in this industry saying, all my parents did was work. All they did was work, and for all that money, I'm still having to support them because they weren't classified correctly. They weren't buying into their retirement. And it's easy to say, "Oh, well, can't you just be an employee?" And then, but the thing is, I think there's just misconceptions about employee and W-2, where a manicurist may feel like if they can get more money up front, then that helps them right now. Because right now they need to pay rent. Right now they need to pay for their children's food, and so things like this, I think, as a low-wage worker, are something that we just see across the board. And I would say that California actually needs to be a model, and I think some folks here, everybody agrees that there needs to be a shift in how we all want the industry to be looked at in a different way. There needs to be a shift in how the industry is functioning and how it's viewed publicly, because we see these trained licensees, professionals, doing amazing work, and they deserve to be respected. And so I think California can actually pave the way in being proactive in addressing the way that workers are treated and the way that the industry is viewed. We're trying to do that as an organization, as a small but mighty organization. And so that's what I would encourage the state board to do. And for us, the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative, we support AB5 with no exemptions. And I also wanted to read a statement from one of our owner members who couldn't be here today, but she did send me the statement that she wanted me to read. My name is Trang Wills, and I'm the founder and owner of Base Coat Nail Salon, one of the first non-toxic nail salons in the country. We do not offer acrylic or dip powder nails and have created our own line of plant-based and essential oil spa products, as well as our own line of 8 and 10 free nail polishes free of the most harmful and toxic chemicals. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. When we first opened, we hired our manicurists as 1099 independent contractors. After opening in 2013, I realized that within this industry, there needed to be a higher standard with how nail salons are run. Manicurists work hard and pay for professional training. They are licensed professionals. We need to create a culture within the nail salon industry where manicurists are respected for their craft and valued for their time. They need to be treated with respect by owners and by clients as well. I say this as the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. My mother has been a manicurist for over 20 years. I grew up in the nail salons and saw my own sister, my own mother, and my own family members get exploited by the people that were running salons. They were treated like employees and misclassified as independent contractors. They had their hours set for them, and they used the nail salon's products. I saw them have their tips taken away, not get paid on time, and not allowed to take lunch or rest breaks. This, unfortunately, is such a common practice in nail salons that most people try to ignore. At Base Coat, we switched all staff from independent contractor to employees because it was the right thing to do. Yes, it was scary at first because we had to pay for things like workers' comp and taxes. Yes, some of our workers were not used to being treated fairly and did not like seeing their taxes taken out of their paychecks. On the administrative side, it was easier for me as a business owner to have W-2s than 1099s. But now our workers know that they are being protected and rightfully have sick time, vacation time, workers' comp, lunch breaks, and overtime pay. We are providing stability for our employees so they don't have to worry about moving from salon to salon and working at different places. At the same time, I'm still a business owner and I'm trying to make ends meet. Some of our nail salons are doing well and some are struggling to break even and stay out of the red. Rent is expensive, and we are paying more to have less toxic nail products. However, for me, this is worth the struggle and fight to shift the nail salon industry to be one that respects manicurists for the work and expertise they are providing to clients. We need to change the nail salon industry, and California must lead the way. Thank you.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
So, just to understand a little bit better, in your organization, what are the salon owners usually telling the manicurists, that they're independent contractors or employees?
They're telling them that they are W-9 independent contractors, 1099.
1099
Yeah.
independent contractor. So they're usually paying them cash?
It's a combination that we have found where they're being paid check, cash, some under the table we have found too.
And obviously they don't understand. Okay, well, thank you for that information. It's helpful.
I guess I'm the last one. All right, I actually have a lot to say, unfortunately, so I will. Hopefully it won't be too long. So again, hi everyone. My name is John Trang. I am an attorney at Advancing Justice, a legal services and a civil rights organization here in LA. So before I explain my organization's reasons for kind of supporting AB5 and requesting that the board oppose any or the kind of current motion or resolution that's before the board, I'd like to share a quick story about a woman named Lan. So Lan was born in Vietnam, and like hundreds of thousands of other Vietnamese Americans, she fled a war-torn country and sought refuge here in the United States. In fact, she was pregnant when she fled Vietnam, and she had her baby on a refugee camp. Months later, Lan and her husband arrived in San Francisco with a little boy in tow. Her husband, a mechanic, was unable to earn the kind of income to support the entire family by himself. So Lan thought about what she could do to provide for her family. She looked around and saw that many of her friends were becoming nail salon workers, nail salon technicians, so she followed suit. She went to beauty school, trained, did all the hours, and obtained a license. From then on, she worked as a nail salon technician. Like the vast majority of nail salon workers, Lon did what she was told by the establishment or nail salon owners. The owners were the ones that set the prices for the services. They told her when to start her day, when she could leave. They assigned her all the walk-in customers. She did not have a right to pick and choose the kind of customers that came in. She was not paid by hour. She was paid by a percentage, or as someone mentioned, a commission. And this was based on the number of clients that would come in that day. So on days when it was slow, when it was snowy, not snowy, but rainy, sometimes you just had 1 or 2 or 3 customers. So her take-home pay was as low as $20-$30 a day. She was told she was a 1099, a code for independent contractor. But in reality, she, under the law, before Dynamex and clearly after Dynamex, she was in fact an employee because of all the lack of independence that she had. The problem with being misclassified, as many have talked about today, is that Lon didn't have any of the protections that were put in place for employees, including overtime pay, minimum wage, meal and rest breaks, unemployment insurance, disability insurance, Social Security, and a host of other benefits that both employers and employees have to contribute. So one thing that Lisa Fu mentioned was that she was misclassified, and one kind of real impact that we should mention is that she doesn't receive Social Security benefits. For Lon, she did not know the difference between being an employee and independent contractor. She did not understand the consequences of this misclassification. Her English was limited. The law is confusing. It's confusing even for me at times as a lawyer. So she knew what she was told by her employers. Then what she also knew was to focus on providing for her family, for her children. So she toiled away, day in and day out. She cleaned and scrubbed feet and hands. She painted them right to make them pretty. She tried her best to chit-chat in broken English with the hope of getting an extra $1 or $2 in tips. She did this for 20 years, completely oblivious to the consequences of being misclassified. So how do I know Lon's story? Lon is my mom. And I share these details of my mother's story, not because it's unique, but because it's emblematic of the entire industry in our state. It's the reason why I strongly support AB 5, because AB 5 begins to clamp down on what we all agree, which is that there's rampant misclassification and as a result, exploitation in this industry. I know that was a long story, so I'm going to make the rest of it snappy and tell you a few different things I think are worth mentioning. So, AB 5 combats misclassification and simplifies the law. I think we've already mentioned that a few people have mentioned that. So, we all can agree that misclassification is a problem, and I think that AB 5 does simplify the law and does make it harder to misclassify. It reduces the odds of workers like my mom and many others from being mislabeled as independent contractors when they in fact should have been an employee all these years. It also reduces the odds that it also makes it easier, and by simplifying the law, it makes it easier for small businesses that are trying to do what's right to understand how to do the right thing. Number 2, AB 5 creates a floor, not a ceiling. I think there's been a bit of fear-mongering from my perspective around the idea of not being able to still operate as an independent contractor. There's no section in the law that prohibits the creation of independent contractor. I think that's really important to kind of underscore. AB 5 serves as guardrails for the benefit of both vulnerable workers as well as law-abiding employers. So, and I should mention, other states do deploy the ABC test, the Dynamex test, which AB 5 codifies, including Massachusetts. Businesses continue to thrive in other states where the ABC test is applied. So, kind of related to this idea that AB5 creates a floor but doesn't prohibit at all the creation of an independent contractor or a booth renter. Laws are really most important when there are allegations of it being broken. So what I mean by that is you can imagine a situation where a beauty professional wants to rent a portion of the salon, wants to rent a booth, renders their services, possesses the kind of complete autonomy, sets the prices, collects the wages, come and go as they please, all the things that we talked about. There is a world in which that relationship remains possible. It does require more communication. It probably requires some documents and some setting out some terms, but that's what AB5 is geared to address, to kind of encourage more communication, to encourage more intentionality. And the flip side is that it reduces, again, the rampant misclassification. So when we talk about benefits, costs, we have to consider all those factors. The last thing I'm going to say is that AB5 does benefit the larger community. I think it's been mentioned a bit already. And there's two things I want to mention about the benefits to the larger community. One is that it does make it harder for unscrupulous employers to use misclassification to shift business costs to workers. This means that they cannot as easily lower prices and get an unfair advantage over law-abiding businesses. I think Lisa Fu mentioned that they've had frank conversations with employers that want to do the right thing, but it would be difficult if they were kind of doing it on their own. This levels the playing field. So number two, and the last thing, is that misclassification also means that unscrupulous employers and owners are underreporting the number of true employees that they have, that they're not properly contributing to business taxes, medical insurance, unemployment insurance funds, FICA. This also means that they're underreporting their income, all of which means that they lower their tax base, which hurts the larger community. And this is only to the benefit of that one particular unscrupulous employer. And I think that we all can agree that that's also unacceptable. So when we talk about the pros and cons and what's at stake here, I hope that we consider all the factors, including benefits to vulnerable workers, the benefits to law-abiding businesses, and to the larger community. So given the number of unquestionable benefits of AB5, I strongly encourage the board to reject this current resolution, and hopefully, if there are real concerns, that there will be opportunities in the future, as I think Mr. Jones mentioned, kind of cleanup bills. That can be part of the picture that I hope that you all can think about. But right now, creating carve-outs for AB5 would do more harm than good in light of all that we know. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, it was just to clarify to Ms. Crabtree, because I heard you earlier state something that I just want to see if I misheard. So the motion before you, without this motion, let me start this way, there'll be no role for the state board in any of this debate, because it'll be municipal government that hands out business licenses. There's no reference to a state board license. It's just workers who claim to be hairstylists, whatever that means. But by supporting this motion, you will be supporting embracing booth rental. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other here. But I do think you'll be supporting a new form of booth rental, in Ms. Underwood's word, a game changer, forcing them out of the shadows because you're asking for a booth rental permit from this board. So an alternative motion may be offered that says, nope, we're not going to support, in theory or in practice, booth rental.
They said they took out the booth rental permit.
Right. The motion
asking
before
to
you,
put it
that's
back
what I'm
in.
trying to clarify. The motion before you is
To put it back in.
requesting the legislature put the booth rental permit back in and reference specifically all the scope of practice license code sections. So not just nebulous terms like hairstyle. That's the motion before you. But I'm just clarifying. That would be you saying, I'm willing to give an exemption for booth rental. The alternative, which may be a motion later offered, will be, no, booth rental's not good, and we, as a board, aren't going to go there. I get that.
I appreciate it. It's not that I don't approve of booth rental. I just approve, like the other stories of protecting the workers. There's just a lot.
Absolutely.
This goes into that
Yep.
needs to be thought about.
But are you clear? That's
I'm
all
very
I
clear.
wanted to do. I wasn't
Thank you.
responding to
Appreciate
anybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, but I know that it's also, I think we might need a break at this point. Would it be okay do we need to take a vote before we take a break? Okay, I'd like to give my board members a 5-minute break.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are reconvening.
Marcy.
That is the analogy.
All right, we're live.
Okay, coming back from break, and so we are still on agenda item, the legislative update, so agenda item number 8, but we are discussing the motion that is on the floor. So there is a motion that came to us from the Health and Safety Committee, and we have heard public comment. So before the board right now, we need to go to a vote, and the vote is on. There are a few options. I just want to make it clear because it might be a little confusing. Our options are to accept the motion. If your vote is yes, you can vote no to reject the motion, or you can abstain. And the motion from the committee is two separate things: approach policymakers for a booth rental permit. This is separate. And then there is also engage the AB5 author to clean up the language that is currently in AB5 regarding barbering and cosmetology licenses. Questions?
What's your thoughts?
My thoughts?
Because you started with this, with your thoughts of what you did some research on. Oh, sorry, what you did the research on. Your thoughts now that you've heard the public comments.
It's the same. I think my opinion is that we need hearings on this, and we will be doing sunset hearings. And I think that if this motion was not in play, my preference would be to remove all of the language that is in AB5 concerning our board, and I would take it to hearings so that we actually get input, so that we can create the correct language to actually deal with whatever it is that our industry needs after hearing from our industry. Because right now we have members in the public here in attendance, but we have not actually heard from everyone.
So if we say no to this, would that then allow us to do that?
We could introduce a new motion, yes. So
But you still have to take a position on AB5.
I get it. I just wanted
Right.
to know what, so we could do no or accept it or,
right.
got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Is the board ready to vote? Do we need further? No. Do we need
I
further
move to call
discussion?
the vote. And let's start on the vote.
I will start. I'm going to vote no on this motion.
Andrew Drafkin, no.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, no.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
The no's win.
Okay.
That motion does not carry.
So the motion does not carry, which means that we can now discuss the board's position on AB5. And we are welcome to introduce a new motion if that's what the board would like to do. I do think that there are two things we can discuss, which is the booth rental permit separately, and then we can discuss what we would like to do on AB5, so we can keep that separate.
I think because the booth rental permit was taken out of the bill, I think it would be difficult to get back into AB5. I do think it's a good thing, we should discuss, and I'm leaning towards it. And I think that's something that we should maybe address separately as maybe a consequence as AB5, if it does pass, something like that, something to deal with the sunset in coordination with the legislature to develop a booth rental permit to solve some of those issues. I think that's something to take up separately than just whether we support or oppose AB5. I think that's an issue that's come to us, and I think that's something we just need to address, and we should probably just address it separately instead of combining it into the sausage making of AB5.
I agree with that because the booth rental permit discussion started prior to AB5, and I understand, I think, or we understand the benefits of a booth rental permit, so I completely agree with you, Andrew, regarding that being like a separate issue that we discussed and tried to implement as a board, especially knowing with our defined schedule and how we're trying to identify and distinguish establishment owners and independent contractors or booth renters in the salon space.
So I don't know if we want to vote on like doing something, but maybe make sure we put it on the agenda for the October or December meeting as part of our ongoing agenda. But then we come to what do we do about AB5?
Mm-hmm. I think Lisa should use her gavel, turn into a magic wand.
Make it all disappear.
One of the things I heard today, and I just mentioned it to Steve, it's like, if I had a choice, I would do X, but my organization wants me to do Y, or believes Y. And, it just, with the tragedies that have been going on with gun violence, etc., you hear the people say, people are for gun reform, but the organization, the NRA, isn't. And it's like, well, then nothing's ever going to get done if whatever the organization is opposed, and yet the people are for it. I am kind of the desire to, if we either exempt everybody, or then we get into the sausage making of who gets the exemptions, who doesn't, all that. If we just take our language out of, if we support, if amended, basically take out the exemptions, I guess. Let the cards fall, and then deal with the intended and unintended consequences. That might be a better approach rather than trying to put together a house of cards the way it is right now. That's kind of where I'm personally leaning, but
Just for clarity, make sure I'm understanding, if you're suggesting that we just completely remove
the exemptions
for all of our licensees.
For all of our licensees.
And if we do that, would AB5 impact us at all, or would we just no, Mike?
We could just exempt ourselves completely out of it. Then we're not even a part of AB5.
If they do pull
if
us out
they do
of it.
pass it, and then
Then nobody's
we'll
exempted.
Just hit on
it hits every, it hits, it'll hit everybody that it's intended to hit. Now, as some people have said, some people are opposed to it because it's going to hit them. And then maybe we deal with, well, what are the right things to do? And maybe our discussion of a booth rental permit will satisfy those things going forward, and there might be a little bit of pain before we get clarity in cleaning it up.
So the thing
I'm
is,
sorry, I just wanted to finish. Michael, can I ask you a question? So can we ask if we wanted to just to take our industry completely out of this bill, ask for that, but that doesn't mean that it would happen. Is that correct? Thank you.
So we can either support the bill as it is, support if amended, and asking the amendment be remove us, in my suggestion. Or we can amend it other ways if we wanted to.
Right.
We can continue a watch, which is thinking no opinion, but then people
No,
are going to say, why are we
we've
have
already
no
got
opinion?
stuff in here. We've got to do something about it one way or
Or we
another.
could oppose 85 saying, the exemptions aren't good.
But are we risking if we take us out of it that they will? I don't know enough to know if they would listen to that.
You don't know if we ask to be taken out, if they will take us out.
Correct.
I mean, you never know at the end of the day.
Okay, I haven't
But then
gone
you
there
have-
enough to know,
you
so
have
I'm
the-
asking your guys' advice.
I can tell you that when the board makes a decision, I notify the author's office and whatever committee that bill is going up to, and I also notify the Department of Consumer Affairs, so that if the bill does get enrolled, they then develop an enrolled bill report that goes to the governor's office. So it's gonna, whatever the board decides is gonna follow this bill now through its process.
Okay.
But we
So
also
our voice
have-
is going to be heard.
Got it.
And we'll have to deal with
Thank
the political consequences, if we decide to, support only if amended, and then it's not amended, so therefore we don't support, people are gonna say, well, why didn't you, there might be,
Right.
want to take that out on us kind of a thing. So
Well, the other thing
those, all
to
those kinds of things to deal with. Sorry.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. But the other thing to consider is that we will be going through sunset next year. And if we determine that this AB5 needs cleanup language to address various pieces of the industry and the different licenses, that can be part of our sunset bill package. Is that correct, Christy?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So this is not the last chance for us to address any kind of inconsistencies with Dynamax and AB5. I just don't like feeling pressured to agree to language that could be hurtful to any part of our licensed population. And it's not an end-all, be-all. And I would prefer to take the time to actually deal with this.
Exactly.
So just hearing what you just said, then therefore in your mind, probably a position, our current position of watch isn't good because as the bill is drafted, it does possibly hurt. So therefore, we need to take a stand one way or another.
Right, because I think when we took the watch position, this language was not in the bill. We were not included. There were no exemptions at that time for us. And that's why we chose to watch it.
I mean, I totally agree, Lisa, especially from what we've heard. I feel like it's our duty to protect everybody in our industry as much as we can.
So I'm okay with making a motion if the board is ready to hear a motion.
Yeah.
My motion will be to amend AB5 to remove all language referring to BBC licensees and to address AB5 and Dynamax impact on the industry through our sunset hearing process.
A second.
So that would be a position of support if amended then, basically, is what would be telling the legislature.
Yes.
Would you repeat the motion?
So the motion is to support AB5 if amended, with the amendment of removing all language from AB5 regarding BBC licenses.
Is it all language or is it all exemption? Is there language in there that's not?
There is. So there is language on page 2 of AB5 specific to workers providing hairstyling or barbering services. And then again in page 6, section. Yes, section 6.
Okay.
So the net effect is we're buying out. This motion would buy us out of that. Without necessarily any positive benefits of AB5, we're now excluding. It's basically voting against AB5, wouldn't it?
Actually, no. The exemption and carve-out language in AB5 makes it that language is specific to our industry. So what AB5 does is codify Dynamex, which says that all other than those mentioned specifically in the bill and those carve-outs, that AB5 applies to all industries. So the Dynamex 3-part test would then apply to this industry. Right.
It's for the Dynamex test, basically.
Right.
Just for that, right.
And we're eliminating any carve-outs.
So I can open this up for public comment at this time.
Hi, Fred Jones again, PBFC. So to clarify, you would basically be striking on page 6, because page 2 is just alleged counsel version. It's not a codified section. You would be striking the entirety of page 6, lines 30 through 40, and page 7, lines 1 through 10. So every reference to our industry.
Yes.
Okay. Which would have the net effect of saying Dynamex now applies to our industry, which, as I've already said, so don't want to be a broken record, probably will make all forms of booth rental as currently practiced illegal. Just for clarity's sake.
To my understanding, I don't think that's true, but I am not an expert on Dynamex, and so I just want to put that out there. I don't know that I agree.
Because there are other ways you can still have booth rental and
Right.
it's still legal.
Right.
You said the way it's currently practiced, though. So the way it currently is practiced.
Well, AB5 codifies the 3-part test of Dynamex.
Right.
The second part, B,
I'm talking about currently. Not everything that currently is, even with Dynamex, makes it illegal to be a booth rental.
Yeah.
It isn't. I know it isn't. I know that there's other ways you can conduct business, is what I'm saying. So I don't think Dynamex is killing the booth rental industry.
right. Well, then you and I would disagree. Legally, I do not know of a single salon out of 55,000, the vast majority of which are booth rental today, that conforms to Part B of Dynamex. Not one.
One other just quick question. Since we don't license, or we don't have the natural hair braiding, even though they have that as here as an exemption, they're not, if we take it out, we're not. It's just a misunderstanding on the legislator's part, basically, by.
But we wouldn't take that out
We
because
would-
we're,
okay, 'cause
we're
we
not
were
going
saying
to
we're-
reference those lines. We're going to
Okay,
reference
those-
Barbara Cosmetology.
Okay, all right, got it. Just making sure.
Hi, everyone. I just I feel like I want to mention that I am a lawyer. I focus on employment law, among other things, and I have had to litigate issues around misclassification pre and not post Dynamex. But I want to say that again, AB5 creates a floor, does not create a ceiling. I think that if there are conversations that need to be had by other employment law experts about whether or not proposals, including certain rental booth arrangements that people are contemplating, would be permissible under Part B of the ABC test, I think that's warranted. However, I think it's a little bit, but in my opinion, I think it's an unfair analysis to say that as written, this ABC test essentially prohibits or eliminates all iterations of rental booth arrangements. I think that's fear-mongering, and I think that's unfair characterization. And again, 9 years of employment law experience, and you can look me up if you like, but I think that's too much of an unfair characterization.
Jamie Schrabeck, Precision Nails. So it's my understanding that you'd rather amend the law if you had the power, which you don't have the power to amend this law. You're suggesting this. Your position would be that any reference to any occupation or service that's regulated by the BBC be removed?
Yes.
Okay, because it's not just licenses, because as we know, they've got the phrasing in there, workers who provide hairstyling services and that sort of thing. So it'd have to be any reference to any occupation or service. And again, that's a gamble. Because they could just say, yeah, we're just going to go with it the way it is. So
Still have to deal with the unintended consequences.
could you not make a motion somehow that says it would be our preference that it all be taken out? But if it's not going to be taken out, I refer you to the motion that came to you from the Health and Safety Advisory Committee.
So that would mean that we would need to consider an amendment to the motion if we do want to consider what Jamie has just mentioned.
My question is, if we do that, it sounds wishy-washy. I think we need to go one way or another. And sometimes you have to gamble on life and take a stance.
So any additional public comment? Yes.
I do have just a comment for clarity, because I keep going back to Part B. Does the worker perform work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business? When we're referring to like the 1099 employees, that's because the owner is reporting the income they're giving the licensee as like the contractor, which means they're more than likely paying them commission, possibly. Whereas if you're doing booth rental the correct way, the booth renter would 1099 the owner because they're paying rent. Okay. 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 Just wanted to.
Right. Okay. So if there's no additional public comment, okay, Wendy, please.
I say take the gamble and stand up. Take the gamble and stand up. Because that doesn't exclude us from the opportunity to approach the legislature to have our own bill that codifies our complicated little industry, that doesn't involve the fact that we have, truck drivers involved and labor unions and things like that. I say stand up and take the gamble and ask the legislature in sunset that we very possibly ask for our own bill around the whole entire industry, because we literally touch everybody in the state of California. So, thank you.
Additional public comment? Anything else from my fellow board members before
I
moving
guess
to
one question I just have is, all right, so let's just say the legislature does what we want and AB 5 then passes. If what Fred is saying is basically we've blown up the whole booth rental industry, which there's a question. If we did, the other question then becomes is that how quickly does the government, whichever department would be to enforce that before we can get, and they could always delay enforcement if they know we're working on this booth rental permit.
Well, it's enforced right now. And so it is already happening. So it is.
Because it was a court ruling.
Yeah, it's been going on for a year, this DIMEX, so
Well,
it's already going on.
I don't know, I think it's being slow played.
Well, it's the government.
So,
I mean, you've got to have enough people to regulate it.
Is that there is the possibility that it can continue to be slow played until these issues are resolved or something like that. Wink and nudge kind of a thing. Okay. All right. Just to get that question asked.
Sure. Additional comments? No? Are we ready for a vote?
I'm ready.
You're ready? Do you want to start?
Yes. Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Steve Weeks saying that I generally support exemption. I think this is a flawed bill, but I think it's going in the right direction, and I'm hoping for cleanup language, so I would oppose.
Interjection, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Steve.
Okay, I think it's back to me now for the rest of the legislation.
Yes.
Nothing will be that exciting coming going.
It's going to be so
The next bill on our list is, AB 496. We supported this bill at our last hearing. There hasn't been any significant changes. This refers to gendered terms, and this bill is in the Senate. So I would just move on, if that's all right.
Okay.
The next bill is AB 613. This bill, we supported it. This bill is regarding some regulatory fees, but this bill is not moving. The next bill is AB 1271. We have a watch position on this bill. It is regarding some examination reporting requirements. This bill is in Assembly D&P, and it's an Assembly bill, so it's likely stalled as well. The next bill is AB 1607. This is gender discrimination notification. We supported this bill, and this bill is moving. It is actually in a Senate hearing today. So we'll just continue with that. The next bill is actually new to our board. I don't believe we've seen it, but we wanted to let you know about it. This is SB 188, which is regarding discrimination in regards to hairstylists.
Dr. Carey.
Dr. Carey.
Our very own Dr. Carey did do some press on this, and this bill was signed by the governor.
So we can take a position on it now?
It's an easy one.
We support.
Right.
Next is SB 606. This is new to our board. It is the 1-year extension of our sunset review. And I would kindly ask the board.
Support if amended, like last another 3 years.
Okay, so.
I'll move that we support the bill.
Okay.
I second.
Public comment
On just that last one, or?
on Glazer's SB 606.
Just the sunset review.
Okay. No public comment, then I will go to a vote. I'll start. Lisa Tong, yes.
Interjection, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carey Williams, yes.
Thank you. The next bill is SB 607, which we had taken a position of support on. I recommend we maintain that position. This is currently, it's written as our Health and Safety Committee, adding an additional member. This is a 2-year bill. It will likely have different language in it ultimately, but since it refers to us right now, I just recommend we continue with our same position.
It hasn't changed since
Has
our
not
position?
changed, no. And that's it.
Okay. All right, so next agenda item.
Do you have public comment on any of that?
In terms of just legislative update in general?
Yes.
Can we do
1607 specifically.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. So, Wendy Cochran, California Aesthetic Alliance. This bill actually calls out the specific language of barbers and hair salons in the poster that we are supposed to post in our lobbies, no less than 24-point type, all bold, et cetera, et cetera. The noise that we're getting is, well, I run a lash studio, I run a waxing place, and I don't have to post this poster. because we didn't have the specific language that reflects BBC licensees in good standing or establishments, it specifically calls out barbers and hair salons again.
Can
And
you identify the section? I'm sorry.
It says existing law. If you look at the poster, the DCA PDF that has the big green box in it, and everything like that, the actual law itself calls out barbers and hair salons, but the chatter amongst the licensees is that, well, if I run a lash studio or if I run a waxing place and it's not a hair salon, that I don't have to post this poster.
So this is on page 4, section 2, under line 22. Develop a pamphlet or other informational materials for use by the following business establishments, and it only lists barbers and hair salons. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes.
And just also for clarification for the board, that's not in our code as well.
Oh.
So this is for cities and counties. It would be nice if it said establishments.
Yes.
So do we want to go back and bring this to the attention of the bill author? I know we moved on from the item.
The board can make that motion.
What section did we support for a
We
while?
supported it previously.
So support amendment.
So a friendly amendment to address the discrepancy in language. Okay.
Okay. Also, they wanted a clarification as to the price list available. Does that mean that it has to be physically printed, or can it be presented digitally?
So that seems way out of our scope.
Right. So they're all nervous that they have to print out and have like a rack card with all the costs of the services and things like that. Our industry, our segment of the industry, is being challenged because we have acceptance of gender fluidity. We have people in transition that are targeting specific waxing establishments. And we have a situation where there is a court case in Vancouver where the individual has gone to salons and specifically is calling them discriminatory because they asked for a Brazilian, and then they show up with genitalia that is not typical of the female Brazilian that we are trained to do. But even though that person presents as female, shows up with the traditional male genitalia. And if you refuse that service, they are threatening to sue us. And this is a massive, massive topic in our waxing salons and our cosmetology situations. Now, whether these people are doing it maliciously or because there is a lot of discrimination against people that are, making transitions in life, is also something we should consider. The schools, if they do teach you intimate waxing services, they are teaching you female Brazilians. And so we are all assuming that we are dealing with a vulva and that the person that presents as a female is not walking in and presenting with a penis. And a lot of people are very, to adopt the colloquial term of being triggered, because we don't want to harm them when we don't have the right training. Or if we have our own personal issues, like, I'm a survivor of trauma and I don't want to have to deal with this. Or I want to respect my spouse and I don't want to have to respect this. There is a lot that is going on with regard to this bill. And not only is it, barbers and hair salons, the sassy retort to all of this is, well, I'm in a waxing salon, so now I don't have to touch them and I don't have to put this poster up either. So there's a lot for the board to actually consider with regard to 1607 and how to protect your licensees from being sued by someone who maybe has a vicious litigant type of personality, without discriminating against people that are in transition, and being respectful of who they want to be and who they are in life. So I just want you all to kind of think about that, but definitely establishments would be a better language to amend to, so that you are capturing everyone. But we are being targeted very specifically on the phone, walk-ins, it doesn't matter. So that's what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Shoot, that's kind of interesting in the sense because we've experienced it in my salon with men. So I don't know if that's making sure with getting waxing.
No.
I don't know that, I definitely think that's a discussion that this board can have. I don't know that it's a
It needs to be
discussion
done
that
now.
needs to be for this bill. I
Okay.
think there's bigger issues in the waxing industry that need to be talked about. And I would agree with changing this for sure to establishments and recommending that to the author's office. If we could get that changed, I think that's good. Okay. So could someone make that motion?
Yeah, I can make the motion to amend, to support with an amendment to change the language to reflect BBC establishments instead of barbers and hair salons.
Is this a separate motion that I can second, or is this an amended motion that the person who seconded it has to second?
This is a new motion.
Okay, I will second that. Sorry. I need lunch.
So do we have a second?
Andrew.
Is Andrew
Yes.
second? Okay.
Okay, public comment on the motion. So no public comment. I will move to a vote. I'll start with Dr. Carey.
Dr. Carey Williams, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Andrew Drafton, yes.
Lisa Tong, yes. Okay, so I think then that if nothing else, we will move on from the legislative updates
Regulations.
to agenda item number 9, proposed regulations.
So, just a quick overview of where we are with regulations, and then I will ask for a motion on one item. Definition of access, which we included in your packet, which clarifies our definition to make it more understandable to licensees of where an inspector can look. That has been filed with OAL and will become effective October 1st. We had a public hearing on our fine schedules and payment plans, and we didn't receive any public comments, so that's going through the process to finalize that package. And then we have several that are under review at DCA, transfer of credit, personal service permit, which I'm going to talk about in just one second, disciplinary guidelines and substantial relationship criteria. So that's just a status update, and then we're continuing to still work on our translation guides as well as our externs. So no action needed on that. I did provide an additional document for our PSP. Our legal office did have some recommendations. I have actually a couple tiny changes that I would like to recommend to the board on this. So we have a recommendation to add a kind of a definition of establishments, and that's within your package under section 900. But we would like to remove activities practiced, and it should be services performed because that's how we refer to it. So clarifying that language as well as removing the word booth, because right now we don't have a booth, so we don't reference that anywhere in our statutes. So with the exception of those two items that we would change, and then we also had clarification on the services being performed. And I didn't bring my highlighted one, so now I'm lost. Thank you. We added authorized when it comes to cutting, styling, dressing, arranging, curling, or waving. We added these authorized services do not include singeing, relaxing, or dyeing of the hair to make it match what is listed out in the statute. And we did that on both the cosmetologist and the barber. And that is it. So I would, if the board agrees, ask for a motion with the amended language, changing activities practiced to services performed, and removing a booth from the almost second to last sentence of that section.
I move that we make the amendments to the current language around the PSP.
Second.
Okay, public comment? No public comment, so I will move to a vote. I'll start. Lisa Tong, yes.
Andrew Jackson, yes.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Okay. Is that it for
That's it.
regulation?
Yes.
Okay. So on to agenda item number 10. Items for the next meeting. So it sounds like definitely booth rental permits.
Do we want to talk about this waxing issue?
Do we want to have waxing on the agenda? Like, is that something to, like, what would that sound? what would
I
that
don't know
look
how
like?
we could say anything about that.
starts to help with like a committee, maybe that comes.
On waxing?
Just to be able to have a more fleshed out
In-depth.
conversation.
Would it go to?
Is that health and safety?
So keep in mind when talking about our agenda for October, we could potentially have had a sunset review hearing since then, because the intention is to have some hearings possibly towards the end of summer, first part of fall.
Okay.
So I would ask that you kind of go kind on us, since we're going to have a meeting in 2 months. We would like to bring some regulations on apprentice reform, as well as our regular items as well. And then booth rental, I think, is a great topic. I think waxing is going to come up possibly during sunset as well, or we can look at it through as soon as we get more members, we would like to establish our committees again and have them take on some of those detailed work.
So maybe we put a pin in it and maybe revisit for when we would like to discuss it at the
That sounds
December
great.
meeting or something
That would
like
be
that.
awesome.
So it's something on the agenda
Right,
to be on the agenda.
Exactly.
When do we discuss DRC possible specific language to the law? We seem to be doing like this sub-regulatory thing right now, and different, interpretations of what our regulations are. Is that more appropriately done at a committee level? Ideas for consistency in DRC opinions?
Do you mean in health and safety? Because I think that's going to all come up during our review of the health and safety regulations.
Any other items for the agenda for October's meeting?
Didn't I hear earlier single cut score?
Oh, yes.
Those are those items that were on the agendas today that haven't been finalized are going to stay on the agenda. So we're going to have that come as well. And yes, we're going to hopefully put that to bed at their next meeting as well.
At the October meeting.
Or put it to regs.
I don't have any agenda items, but I just wanted to tell everyone that I successfully passed my cosmetology board exam.
Congrats.
All right. Don't just let anyone pass that. Yeah. Now we can do a single.
Now take it in Spanish again and see how you do.
Okay, so if nothing else on number 10, we can adjourn the meeting. Okay, so meeting adjourned at 1:31.